Good morning. Board members are seated. We're going to go ahead and begin the meeting. This time I'd like to call the board meeting of the Elementary and Secondary Education Board to order. May I have a roll call?
Mr. Baird? Mr. Baird is absent. Mr. Bennett?
Here.
Mr. Bennett is present. Ms. Bradford?
Here.
Ms. Bradford is present. Ms. Bouquet?
Here.
Ms. Bouquet is present. Ms. Destug?
Here.
Ms. Destug is present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Ms. Givens? Ms. Givens is absent. Mr. Geis?
Here.
Mr. Geis is present. Ms. Johnson? Here. Ms. Johnson is present. Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Lee is present. Mr. Romer?
Here.
Mr. Romer is present.
Okay. Thank you. The next item is the approval of the minutes from February 17th, 2000. I'm sorry? Oh, sorry about that. Okay, go ahead, Catherine.
Item number 3, approval of the agenda, adding emergency items 24 to 26.
Move approval.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Bouquet, a second by Ms. Johnson to approve the agenda as presented.
There's
Go ahead.
There's been a request to consent items 10A, 10B, 13, and 21.
Okay, board members, I actually requested that we consent 4 items on the agenda. I'm going to ask Catherine to read them again, and if that meets with your satisfaction, I'd like to amend that motion.
So,
Ms. Bosniak?
Yeah, the items are 10A, 10B, 13, and 21.
These are receive items. Ms. Bouquet, are you?
As amended, right.
Okay, as amended. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, a proper motion and second. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
Item 4, approval of the minutes of February 17th, 2011.
Move approval.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bouquet. I have a motion to approve, a second by Ms. Bradford. Any objection to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries.
We have a request to take item 23 out of order.
Okay, board members, we have a request to take item 23 out of order. Is there any objection to that request? Hearing none, we'll do so.
Item 23, consideration of granting the State Superintendent of Education authority to appoint an RSD superintendent.
Thank you. Mr. Superintendent Pastrick.
Madam Chairman and board members, I would like to ask you instead to move approval of the appointment of John White. John is my recommendation for leading the Recovery School District, both in New Orleans and statewide. I'd like for John to please stand. John is from New York City these days. He is the Deputy Chancellor for Innovation. He has been originally a teacher, originally in Teach for America, later became an executive director for Teach for America, taught in Newark, taught in Chicago, oversaw Teach for America, and coached teachers and mentored teachers in the Teach for America group in Chicago for 5 years. He went over to New York City to work for Joel Klein. He was the chief operating officer there and ultimately the deputy chancellor for innovation. We're very excited about John's interest in coming to Louisiana and particularly in coming to New Orleans for leadership of the Recovery School District there and also for leadership of the Recovery School District elsewhere. We've had an opportunity over the last 3 months to meet in New Orleans, I have, with many members of the New Orleans community, and I've also met around the state with other individuals, including elected officials, community leaders, educators, parents, students, to talk to them about the vision for the Recovery School District, both in New Orleans and statewide. Those meetings, over 30 of them, I personally attended and personally conducted conversation, and in each of those meetings I asked what the preferences were with respect to the superintendent, because the conversation around the vision was, this vision is being prepared so I can find a replacement for Paul Vallis, and that replacement will operate consistent with this vision. And I asked people in all of those meetings, identify people who you think I might consider. Tell me the characteristics that you think I should consider. It was a very, very productive conversation. Now, that all came to a head when we met in New Orleans about 3 weeks ago, when the Recovery School District Committee met, and we once again presented the vision statement. We published it on the web. We've asked for comments, and we presented it again in the context of, this is our vision for the Recovery School District, and we would like for you to tell us what you think about it, and we want you to understand that we're bringing this vision forward to you for the purpose of using it as the tool or the lens through which we would make a decision about a superintendent. Finally, I'd like to say that John is probably one of the most respected reformers in the country, working for Joel Klein, who is probably the most respected reformer in the country. Joel ran the City of New York schools for 8 years, and recognizing that the model that Joel used in New York and the model which John has implemented in New York is the most analogous model to the one that we're using in the Recovery School District. So as I told people when I met with them for 3 months since January, and talking about what the kind of person that I was looking for in a superintendent, I told them that I wanted to have someone who had tremendous experience in actually implementing a vision like we had for the Recovery School District. There are a handful of places where this work is going on: New Orleans, Denver, Baltimore, New York, Washington, D.C. I've been to all of those places and interviewed people in all of those places, including New Orleans and Louisiana. I've probably met with or reviewed resumes of probably 80 people. And I conducted this search personally. I did it myself, met with these people myself, marched around the country, marched down to New Orleans. Actually, some of the people I considered are people who work in the Recovery School District. People I considered include people who work in schools and in the community in the city of New Orleans and outside of New Orleans in the state of Louisiana. It was an exhausting process because I began this back in September. I wasn't really sure what I had until last week, and it wasn't until Friday that I had the temerity to put on the agenda an item for this to be discussed, because this is a very competitive environment to find people like John. John is in demand in more than one place, as are his colleagues. And I've talked to a number of people around the country about this challenge of trying to find high-quality people. At the end of the day, among those people available, I picked, I believe, the highest quality person, the person I think can most do this job. Yesterday, we had the opportunity to take John to meet with a number of the people that I had been meeting with for the last 3 months. We had lunch yesterday with about 25 leading African-American members of the New Orleans community. Later in the day, we met with another host of people who are actually doing the education work in New Orleans. We went to a couple of schools. Last night, we had dinner with elected officials. And I will tell you that I thought that the response was very, very favorable. A lot of support, a lot of people expressing support. It was very encouraging. And I know that there will be challenges ahead. I know that there will be concerns expressed about one thing or another, but at the end of the day, I'm very proud of the process that we've gone through. I'm very proud of the outcome of the process, and I would like to recommend your approval of John White to lead the Recovery School District. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Ms. Buquet.
It is with great pleasure that, is this on? It is with great pleasure that I move to approve the state superintendent's appointment of John White as the superintendent of the Recovery School District.
Thank you, Ms. Buquet. We have a motion to, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I have several
I have a
seconds.
question.
Just a moment, please. So I'll acknowledge the second by Ms. Bradford. I heard that one first. So the board has a proper motion and second to approve the state superintendent's appointment of John White as the superintendent of the Recovery School District. Are there any questions from board members?
I have a question.
Ms. Johnson?
Is my mic on?
It is. Just get closer to it, please.
Thank you. Let me first say that this is not personal, but I have some concerns. I'm trying to understand a number of things. Number one, we are the BESE board, but we are also the local educational board for the RSD. I'm real concerned, and I heard the superintendent say process. Well, I'm not sure that I understand what the process really was. I don't know anything about the process that was used. Until day before yesterday, I did not even know that we would be doing this today. My concern is twofold, I guess. Back when Mr. Vallis came, and I've checked this out, we took no action, zero action. It was not brought to us at all. So now we're taking action. So that kind of bothers me. The second thing is, do we have to have a waiver of a superintendent's credentials for the RSD? Because that's what we do with all of the other superintendents who don't meet the criteria educationally. That has not, I haven't gotten the answer to that. And I'd like to have the answers to these things. I am not in opposition to Mr. White. I am not in opposition to it at all. But I am in opposition to not understanding the process. And I am in opposition to, if we are doing something for other LEAs, last year, and you all know I voted against it, the young man from Tangipahoa came for us to waive his credentials, a local education agency. And I voted against that. So do we have a different process? And we may have one. The RSD law may say you don't have to do any of the things that you do for local educational agencies, but I think it is something that we need to be aware of and we need to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chairman, if I could.
1 second. I'm going to let the superintendent respond, and then Mr. Bayard.
Madam Chairman, I would say, just by way of background, John is has a bachelor's degree in English, will receive a master's in public administration in the next few weeks, has gone through the Broad Superintendent Academy, has been a teacher, and it's our review of the law that this is a satisfactory credential, as far as I'm concerned, to support him for this purpose. The law itself, I'm going to let Joan respond to, does not require the same kind of certification which is required for certain kinds of districts, number one, and number two, the board has the ability to waive that anyway and has done that on a number of occasions. But Joan, go ahead.
Yeah. There is nothing in law or policy setting forth the qualifications for the RSD superintendent. The law and the policy concerning certification for superintendents is for city, parish, and other local school board superintendents. It does not apply to the RSD.
In fact, it doesn't apply to LEAs, non-traditional LEAs like
This is correct.
charter management organizations or charter schools, et cetera.
That's correct. It's only city, parish, and other local school board superintendents.
Okay, then Joan, explain to me what we are. Are we the board for a local education agency, which is what I thought the RSD was?
The RSD, according to 1990, is an intermediate educational agency administered by the Department of Education.
You're not the local board for the RSD. I know that
Correct.
the board wishes to behave that way, but legally, That is not what you are. And in fact, you asked the other question, Ms. Johnson, and I want to get this one out on the table. You said that for Mr. Ballas's approval, the board did not have to approve it, and you're absolutely correct, because Act 35 provides that the superintendent of education is the appointing authority.
And I
Is that
guess
correct,
that's
John?
my concern for what we're
Ms.
doing
Johnson,
today.
Ms. Johnson, I'll let you respond to him. He's mid-sentence.
Okay,
And
that's my
I
concern for
just-
why I'm asking it today.
Yeah, and so I just want to be clear about this. I was surprised to find that the board included in its bulletin on the RSD a requirement that the board approve it, which is inconsistent with the law, which says the superintendent is the appointing authority. So the board put this in its policy to require it be approved, which I think is out of the bounds of the law and is not consistent with the law. But nonetheless, that's what the board has done. So I don't want to really argue about that with the board. I just soon go ahead and move to approve it. But you're asking why, and that's the answer why. It was not required to be approved by law, by Act 35. It still is not required to be approved. I am the appointing authority, and I should be able to do this independent of the board, but the board
Okay.
passed its own.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Ms. Johnson, would you like to respond or have an additional question?
I have an additional question.
Thank you.
I would really like super clarification of the authority that is granted to the RSD through this board in terms of, in particular, this issue, because to me, it's the superintendent. And I went through and I pulled what the requirements are. I know what they are for other superintendents with LEAs. Now, I understand you're telling me the RSD is not an LEA. Well, that probably is coming as news to a bunch of us here, and that's fine. But you know, if that's what it is, but I'm pretty sure it's coming to me. Well, that's what I'm trying to get, is to try to understand what it is. Well, Mr. Lee is telling me
I think
that-
Ms. Hunt, do you have the language within the RSD statute that addresses that you could share with the board?
Yes, let's see. And it's also in your own board policy that the superintendent is the appointing authority for the RSD.
I absolutely understand that, because that's why I thought we didn't have to do this.
I think Ms. Johnson wants you to address specifically where it distinguishes the Recovery School District from any other LEA. Am I correct, Ms. Johnson?
That's right.
Okay. Let me see if I can get Ms. Hunt to respond to you.
Okay, well, we're talking about for purposes of certification, correct? Or,
Ms. Johnson, would you like to
Is that
clarify?
the only place where we're out of line?
That's the
Well,
only item
well,
that's germane to this discussion.
no, it's just not that straightforward of an
Okay,
answer
okay.
to say. I mean, there are purposes for which RSD is an LEA, but
Okay,
it's not,
all right.
when it comes to certification, it is not.
Okay.
And the superintendent's the appointing authority for the RSD, so he has the ability to hire personnel and set salaries and so forth.
I'll be here, and you show me that after
Okay.
this session.
Okay.
I will be happy to
Thank
look
you.
at it, and if I need to, I'll bring it up in June. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Bayard? Ms. Bayard, can you get closer to the mic, please? Yeah. No, get a little closer.
Is he on?
You're on.
Can y'all hear me? Okay, well, it's probably not on. I'll try to borrow this one. How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Hunt, Mr. Pastorak, members of the board, my consideration, or concern rather, for this is, where does the authority of certification lie? I thought passed legislation that we have an appeals council, and we hear very few, if any, appeals cases on folks to teach or do whatever who are not certified. So does the law that granted the appeals council the authority to act supersede the superintendent's authority to appoint? I don't know where that lies.
The appeals council, again, when you look at 1754, which talks about certification, it says each city, parish, and other local public school boards shall elect a superintendent of schools having such qualifications as may be fixed by the state board.
However, when you say other local school boards, that's fairly encompassing, I think. And again, my question, I don't know what the answer is. Does the authority to appoint by the superintendent supersede certification authority by whomever? be it the appeals council or this board, because we always seem to have waivers that we discuss, or we used to, but now an appeals council is the one that grants it. So that's all I'm asking.
But the Appeals Council doesn't grant certification to an RSD superintendent because certification is not required for an RSD superintendent.
So the law is explicit. You see, Ms. Hunt, I haven't, I apologize for not being that knowledgeable on what the law states, but it just seems to me that we have an inconsistency. And I really believe if we're going to have legislation that has exceptions, the intent of the legislation should be clearly spelled out by the makers. And I'm not sure it's clearly spelled out. I see some ambiguity in it because when you say other local school districts, to me that's fairly encompassing. That's everybody. So I think there might be a slight contradiction in the verbiage. And I'm not, all I want us to do is to be able to go home and say, yes, totally legally, totally up and up, totally right. That's all I want to be able to say. And I'm not convinced I can say that. That's all. Even though, remember, the law is the law, but if nobody contests the law, then we do what we feel best, and that's all it's about.
Thank you, Mr. Bayard. Are there any other board member wish to speak to the motion on the floor? Mr. Romer.
I would just like to say we appreciate you being here, that we're lucky as a state and an RSD to get someone of your skill set and your quality and your experience dealing with issues that we are dealing directly with. I feel very fortunate to follow up Superintendent Vallis with someone of your quality. There is high expectations. There is a great deal of responsibility. We want to assist you in any way we can to make sure you have the tools and the resources to be successful. And I'd like to call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. Before I do that, I have one public comment card by Lee Barrios. Do you wish to speak to this item? Please come forth. Ms. Barrios, please identify yourself and who you represent. And you have 2 minutes.
Okay.
You are.
Lee Barrios. I am a charter member of the new Louisiana Coalition for Louisiana Public Education. I'm a charter member of the Louisiana Public Education Solutions at Work. I'm vice president of the Gifted and Talented Association in St. Tammany Parish and a recently retired national board certified teacher. I'm here to respectfully suggest that for 3 major reasons, Mr. White should not be appointed as the leader of the RSD. First of all, he's wholly unqualified. It's already been pointed out that he has an undergraduate degree in English. Mr. Pastrick says that he's about to get his master's degree, but I haven't seen that reported in any of his bios. It was reported that he was a, quote, teacher. However, a Teach for America instructor used to be, in the state of Louisiana, you had to be certified to be a teacher. Now I know with charter schools you can be non-certified. He was rapidly propelled after that to Chicago as deputy chancellor, to Chicago, then to the New York City Public Schools as deputy chancellor. Quite a move. Only in America. But Louisiana in previous years has had policies in place for qualifications for educators, unless, of course, those were charter schools. Secondly, parental concerns. According to Leonia Heimson, who heads Parents Across America and is a New York City resident, in the views of, quote, in the views of many public school parents, he has consistently ignored our concerns about overcrowding and inequitable distribution of resources and space. For example, of the proposal to place...
Ms. Barrios, you have 1 more minute.
Okay. He once made the statement to the parents, we are trying to make achievement the constant and adults the variable. As far as the results for New York City schools, despite all the money spent and often wasted, achievement has lagged, especially among Black and Hispanic students. According to a report July 28, 2010, in a New York newspaper, New York and other big cities, the number of students passing reading exams dropped by more than a quarter. If Louisiana is going to persist in its business model of a top-down policy making. It also needs to at least make sure the top is heavy with qualified, experienced educators. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barrios. And if you'd like to submit your written comments, you're more than welcome to Ms. Posniak. That was the final public comment. We have we call for the question. We have a motion and a proper second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Any opposed?
I'm not opposed, but I'm abstaining.
Okay, I'd like a roll call, please.
Mr. Bayard?
Nay.
Mr. Bayard votes no. Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett votes yes. Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford votes yes. Ms. Bouquet?
Yes.
Ms. Bouquet votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Ms. Givens?
Abstain.
Ms. Givens abstains. Mr. Geis?
Abstain.
Mr. Geis abstains. Ms. Johnson?
Yeah, abstain.
Ms. Johnson abstains. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Mr. Romer?
Yes.
Mr. Romer votes yes. Ms. Estug?
Yes.
Ms. Estug votes yes.
Okay, motion passes. Well, Mr. White, we'd like to welcome you as the new superintendent for the Recovery School District. I encourage you to partner with this body as the State Education Policy Board and its individual members. We are here, as Mr. Romer said, to support you in your efforts to improve student achievement and to improve the lives of children and families in our state. You have a very impressive track record. You have been successful in challenging situations, and you are entering a very challenging situation. I think most board members would agree with me that communication on the ground and with our families and with our citizens in New Orleans is going to be critical to your success. I also strongly encourage you to partner with the representative member from New Orleans, Ms. Givens. No one has a deeper commitment, love, knowledge, and understanding of the families and children and the educational challenges and successes that Ms. Givens does on this board. So I hope to hear that the two of you work closely together, and I look forward to hearing from Ms. Givens how things are going on the board.
Madam
Yes, ma'am.
you hear from me now. I'd like to, first of all, make this clear to Mr. White that I find him to be a very pleasant young man. I only met him yesterday. But in New Orleans, we have some problems, and I've expressed my concerns to Mr. Pastorek, and I think the board knows that I feel that we have a credibility problem that needs to be addressed in New Orleans immediately. There is some concern that the process of your selection was not more public than it has been. And I told you last night that I would help you in any way that I can to gain public trust. We have to work together to be sure that the children in my community have access to good educational quality regardless of the setting. And I don't want people to think that I am being negative in what I'm saying, but what I'm saying is that there is a lot of animosity in my community toward the RSD and its members. And I really hope that you can work to correct that impression. We are anxiously awaiting to see your plans. I would like to suggest that we do some public meetings so that people can come and talk to you and get to know you. And I'm also concerned that this action is being taken in Baton Rouge and not in New Orleans, where the people of New Orleans would have had a chance to meet you and to respond to your selection. Does that get us off to a bad start? Probably so. So we have a lot of work to do to overcome the deficiencies of this process.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Givens.
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
White,
Ms.
Ms. Johnson?
I have a motion. I don't know if it's...
If you let me finish this, and then if you wouldn't mind, let me finish
yeah, that's fine.
my action, and then we'll entertain another motion. Mr. White, I'd like to invite you to the table, and if you have any comments you'd like to share with the board at this time.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you to other board members, Ms. Givens, for your comments as well, and Mr. Superintendent. I will just say briefly that this is an extraordinary privilege, primarily for two reasons. One, because for those of us who have not been educating in Louisiana recently, Louisiana and New Orleans have been beacons for those of us who have dedicated our lives to children, especially children whose educational welfare has not been well served across this country. And what you have accomplished here is nothing short of extraordinary, and it's a privilege to be a part of it in any way. Second, because the privilege of serving children is a universal privilege, and that you have asked me to be a part of serving our children in Louisiana and in New Orleans is the privilege of a lifetime. Your vision of a system of excellent schools that ensure college and career readiness for every child is inspiring. Ms. Givens, to the question of the plans, I look forward to many, many conversations with respect to developing those plans with the community in New Orleans, with the broader community of educators, parents, students, teachers in Louisiana. And I'm very appreciative of your warm welcome, and thank you for your confidence this morning.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. White. We're glad to have you on board. Ms. Johnson, do you have a motion?
Well, I'd like to put something on the table for possible that may turn into a motion.
Okay.
We were presented with the vision for the RSD a couple of weeks ago. We have a new RSD superintendent. Is it time, and I've been really thinking about this, the RSD has lesser schools under its authority in New Orleans than it has had in the past. And for some reason, I've been looking at it as a truly going out of business RSD. So is it time for this board to have a retreat with the new superintendent for the RSD, take a look at the vision, and see what the next phase of this reform ought to be as guided by this board? And I don't know if I need to make that a motion, but I would like to see that.
I think, Ms. Johnson, if board members, anybody want to comment to Ms. Johnson's comments? Because that is something we are planning for our board's retreat, and we can certainly make that a component of it, Ms. Johnson, without a motion. We can capture that.
I want to add on to
okay, but let me, if you wouldn't mind, Ms. Givens might be able to help you there. Ms. Givens, and then we'll go back to Ms. Johnson.
Actually, I want to make sure I understand what Ms. Johnson is saying. You're saying that the board needs to meet with the new RSD superintendent because you thought it was a going out of business RSD because it has fewer schools under its jurisdiction? Do you mean fewer direct run schools?
Yes.
Because it does.
Yeah,
we do have a lot of charter schools.
No, I mean fewer direct run schools, and because as it started off, say, this big, and it's constantly getting to this big, but there still has to be, because it's in the law, a role for the RSD in Louisiana. And the schools outside of Louisiana, basically, we've been putting under MOUs.
Outside of New Orleans?
Yeah, outside of New Orleans. We've been putting under MOUs. So is it time for us to take a look at the reform in terms of the RSD and set the course based on the vision that we have? And I don't know if it's time or not. I'm just putting it on the table.
I think the time is past due.
Okay.
Certainly we do. We need to have, and we talked about this a bit, we need to have a plan in place to do remediation on those children who are struggling in grades 4 through 12, with particular emphasis on the high schools in New Orleans. And if that's a matter to be held in discussed in a retreat, then so be it.
Well, I guess I'm looking at a more global issue.
Yes.
And in terms of the role of the RSD, is, in my opinion, is changing. That's what I see. The role. Well, it has to be. We put less schools in it under the true same way.
Okay, I'm not going to allow a conversation.
I think.
I'm
trying to understand what her
okay,
question
I'm going to.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, I think this can be further developed into a policy group discussion. It can be developed into a retreat discussion. Why don't the two of you have a conversation? Come back with a recommendation, and I will make sure that it gets somewhere soon. Okay, is there anything else on this item? Okay, thank you, Mr. White. Let's move on to the next item.
We now return to our regular agenda order. Item number 5, notices of intent duly advertised in the January 2011 issue of the Louisiana Register and ready for final adoption.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move approval.
There were actually no notices of intent submitted.
Yeah, there are two different items here, board members. The first one is 5A. I have a motion by Mr. Romer to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Buquet. Any discussion? Hearing none, motion carries. We go to the next
Madam
item.
President, point of information.
Yes, ma'am.
We've talked about a lot of stuff, but I didn't hear anybody talk about a transition plan. As Mr. Dallas is leaving, when does Mr. White come on board? What's the plan for the transition?
We have left that item. Ms. Givens, we have moved on through the agenda.
I understand that. That's why I asked for a point of information. When does he begin working?
Let me see if I can get Mr. Superintendent to back to the, I'm going to ask the State Superintendent to address that, not Mr. White, when he comes back to table.
Somebody.
Okay. I'd like to stay on agenda, Ms. Givens.
understand.
Okay, thank you. Next item.
A point of
Item-
information.
Thank you. I'll get that for you.
Item 5B, notices of intent duly advertised in the February 2011 issue of the Louisiana Register and ready for final adoption after May 21, 2011.
Okay. Is there a motion to?
I'll move
Items
approval.
1 through 8.
There's a motion to approve item 5B 1 through 8. Is there, by Mr. Romer, is there a second?
Is it?
Second by Ms.
I'll second it.
Thank you,
but
Ms.
I have
Johnson.
something to say on it.
Okay, so I have a proper motion and a second to approve item 5B 1 through 8. Ms. Johnson.
On 5B1, which is amending Bulletin 111, it has to do with the letter grade. Because we're moving on this today, public comments can still be made, and if a public comment is made prior to Monday, this item would come back to us. And I'm saying that because I have been called by a number of people who would like for us to review this particular item. So if you really want it reviewed, make a comment so that it can come back to us by our June meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Any other comments or questions on this? Otherwise, we're going to, I'm going to ask for a vote. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Can Ms. Johnson's point be clarified, though? I think they need to do a written comment.
Yeah,
or something. I just wanna make sure.
the point of BESE, in BESE's time frame for advertisement and notices of intent, I have been advised that up until next Monday at 4:30, that if any public comment that's submitted to 904, the board's recorder, will be received until 4:30 on Monday. If an item is received, then the board will revisit this item, will be returned to the agenda in June. So is that clear to everybody in the audience? Okay, thank you. Ms. Johnson, is that clear to you?
Yeah, I guess
Okay.
that since I'm sitting on the board, I'll just go and make a comment to make sure it gets sent
You
back.
did.
Okay.
You did say that. And
I'm going to make a written one.
it is our process. And Ms. Ford has advised me that that is the process. It will occur without any action on the board. Okay, that item is complete. Mr. Superintendent, Ms. Gibbons has asked for you to address another item on the previous RSD superintendent.
So you asked, I think, about transition, Ms. Gibbons. The question is about when will John start. The target date is May 1st. And Mr. Vallis will continue as the RSD superintendent until such time. John is going to come back. He's going to go back up to New York and close out his work next week. And then the following week of the 18th, he's going to be in Louisiana. And he's going to be scheduled to meet with a lot of folks at that time and also meet with the RSD staff. And then he will return to New York to finalize matters, and he and his wife will move down here in May.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Next item.
Item number
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Item number 6, board committee reports. 6A, committee of the whole. 6A1, administration and finance committee, Mr. Romer.
We're on page 4, board members.
Move approval.
3.
Okay, but Mr. Romer makes a motion to approve the minutes of the committee of the whole, administration and finance. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Any opposition?
Question.
Mr. Bayard.
Yes, I had asked for a copy of bids accepted and bids applied for on the construction jobs, the school construction.
You did.
Yeah, and I didn't get anything yet. I was just wondering.
May I ask a question?
Okay, wait, let's see if we can just make this, Mr. Bayard at the meeting in New Orleans did request some information. Can he be assured that he will receive that information, and when? Oh, Ms. Posniak is advising me that she has it, and it has been provided to Mr. Bayard?
Yes.
In which fashion? Via an email?
Yes, I believe that Lona had emailed it to you, but I also have a copy that I can provide you after the meeting.
Okay, so you have been provided that, Mr. Bayard.
It ought to be a lot of paper. I probably didn't notice it, but anyway, there was a lot of schools. Should be a lot. Well, anyway, we'll see. It could be just listings. I'll research and see if I got
Mr. Bayard, if you're not satisfied with the information, please,
All right, thank you.
please let Ms. Posniak know. Okay, was there another question on this item? Ms. Givens.
Yes, I thought that, I wanted to ask the superintendent a question concerning an announcement by the Inspector General that the Inspector General is being hired at a cost of $800,000 per year to do an audit of construction projects. And I wanted to know, is that something that's coming to the board for discussion or explanation?
Ms. Givens, the superintendent is not in the room. When he returns, we'll ask him to address that. I don't, at this point, I'd like to move on this item.
I have no problem.
Okay,
moving
thank
on
you.
the item.
So I have a motion, a proper motion and second to approve the minutes. Is there any objection? Hearing none, motion carries.
6A2, School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, Mr. Romer.
Okay, a motion to approve these minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Ms. Bradford. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries.
Item 7A, Board Advisory Council report, Special Education Advisory Council. The recommendation is to receive the minutes and approve the tentative agenda.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson. A motion to approve and receive. Is there a second? By Ms. Buquet. Any objection? Motion carries.
Item 8, Board Advisory Council appointments. We do have one appointment, and that's behind tab number 8 in your binders.
Move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bennett. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries.
Item number 9, consideration of process to address legislation and positions on proposed 2011 legislation, if any. The recommendation is to approve the proposal.
Okay, board members, we're gonna first hear from the department, and then we'll entertain motions on this item. Who's presenting? He is.
That's
okay,
right.
Mr. Meyer.
I drew the short straw. Good morning, board members.
He got the short straw, right?
That's right. That's right. This was the beginning of a discussion we had with the previous executive director of BESE concerning the realignment of your business, and one of the discussions that came out of that process that we addressed in January with you all was how to handle legislation going forward. And the recommendation at the time that was not acted upon was that the authority be granted for the department to take positions, as had been done in previous years, on bills as they were changed, consistent with where you all have been on recent policy decisions or previous legislative stances. Because as you know, and the gentleman to my right can speak much more eloquently about that, the bill, once session starts, bills change in about every nanosecond in terms of what's going to be in there and what the composition is. So it's much easier for you as a policy-making board, as you expressed back in January, to stake positions in broad terms, but allow the department, as it normally has done with your blessing in the past, to work through the legislative process when amendments are tacked on to bills. So there can be changes to what might happen and what you might feel as a board. So this proposal basically says that you all would grant that authority as has been done in the past, but you would also form a working group of board members, which could work directly with your executive director and with the department, so that that working group could get more frequent updates of what's happening in the legislature, could provide feedback to the superintendent as he goes out and represents you in front of the legislative bodies. And in that way, it's in our estimation, a better way for you to be informed, influence the legislative process, and ensure that decision-making is happening in a way that's consistent with your stated positions and actions. So with that, Madam President, that's our recommendation. We recommend you approve.
Thank you very much for your recommendation. Is somebody whistling?
I don't know who whistled, but I said Madam Chair.
Madam Chairman.
Now, apparently
Oh, Ms. Gibbons.
request to speak is not
Yeah.
working. I've been pressing it. This is, Chris, you just said that in the past, BESE has allowed the superintendent to take position on bills without our authority to do so. I don't think that's the way this is going.
Mr. Meyer, will you clarify your comment?
Yes. So in previous years, after you have met as a board and as a body, you've granted the department explicit authority to continue to take positions on bills as they are modified. So last year, for example, there were a number of bills we walked down that you granted us the authority to work those bills through the process and take positions as the bills would be amended or not. So you would address an initial piece of legislation, and then you said, department, since we're not meeting again, we grant you the authority to work through that process and take positions as you see fit, as we would see fit, based on our previous actions, because that bill will change in between the time you've met and you'll meet again. And so without calling a special called meeting daily during the legislative session, there would be no way for you all to act on every single amendment. So last year you granted that authority as recent as my knowledge, but I've also been told that's happened in years prior to that.
That's a different explanation from what I heard. So you're now saying that now you want BESE to delegate to the superintendent authority to endorse or oppose any proposed legislation based on previous actions of the board. So, for example, when you bring us the legislation that's on the floor, Joe, and we take a position, you're asking us to give you the authority that you've always been given? Or is this some new broad-reaching authority that allows you to take a position and we don't know what's going on?
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
As Chris indicated, I should have brought the minutes with me, but in a board meeting, I'm going to say a year ago, you did grant some flexibility to the superintendent and to his designees. In my opinion, this process, if you approve it, would be a much improved process. It's not unlike, for example, what higher education does, the authority that they give the folks that work in higher education. I think a safeguard, though, to me, that this has that we've not had in the past, this actually calls for a working group of board members, so you'll have continue to have some input, and we'll continue to keep you updated. The superintendent will, and we will, as to what's taking place in the positions that we're taking. And certainly, if that working group disagrees with that, you'll make that known to us, and your concern will be reflected in the positions that we take.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I'm still trying to understand what's different from what we normally do. Why are we doing this before we get to that point?
Ms. Gibbons, maybe I can. I provided this in an email, and it has also provided in the backup. Through the process of streamlining our work and reducing our meetings in response to budget cuts, we no longer have a legislative committee.
I got that.
Please let me finish. The legislative piece is under board admin, but was clearly decided that we would hammer out a process at a later time, and that's what we're doing today. What is being recommended, as I understand it, are two things. One is to grant the superintendent or his designees and within the legislature to represent the board's previously taken positions, so that we don't have to, we're not going to be looking at legislation. If we've already taken a position on a piece of legislation, then they don't have to come back to the board to look at that position can be represented in the legislature. And then secondly, we've always granted some interim authority to the superintendent in the absence of the board being able to take a position, and what they're asking for is that interim authority be continued. The third piece that's being recommended today is that there be a work group formed of board members who will advise the superintendent on legislation as it is filed. And that would give at the most 5 board members the ability to provide input. And as president, I really am wide open to who that membership would be. Frankly, the first 5 people who say they want to be on that working group, it's going to be a lot of work. And if you're interested, Ms. Gibbons, I'm more than happy for you to help us on that.
Madam President, I don't think you heard my question. I asked. I understand everything that you said. The question is, what's different from what we have done in the past? And what I discern that's different is the working group. Everything else is stuff that
I think
we
I
already
answered
do.
that.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
You just read what was there already. But I think that's
Okay.
the only thing that's different.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gibbons. I think I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on.
Correct.
I'm going to move on to the next member,
Do I
Ms.
get an answer
Johnson.
to my question?
There have been 2 gentlemen and myself. 3 people have attempted to answer your
Well, let me
question, Ms.
ask-
Gibbons.
let-
Maybe
the
you can
question
phrase
is,
it a different
what's
way.
different?
What is different, Mr. Meyer?
That's all
Can
the
you try
question
again?
is.
So I think the working group is new. I think this is a more clarifying way of saying that the superintendent and his designees, from this point forward, will take positions on legislation consistent with your action and your ability and in discussions with that working group.
Normally have done. That's all I ask.
Okay, you got your answer, Ms. Gibbons? Thank you. Ms. Johnson, and then Ms.
Let me say that
Mr. Bayard.
I support having a working group working through this. I support what we've done in the past, which allows the department to take a position on legislation that has been previously introduced, that we have previously taken positions on, and the positions are known. What I am concerned about is brand-new legislation that we have never taken a position on, and I'm not so sure 5 people ought to be, only 5 people ought to be advising the superintendent on pieces of legislation that I know, for one, there will be some new ones that we have never taken a position on. So I think by having the working group, there has to be a way, and I don't want these little lawyers to hear this, so y'all close your ears up, for them to let those of us who may not serve, don't want to serve on this, to know what the new pieces of legislation are and to get our opinion, so that if you're going to take a position on it, if the 5 people recommend a positive position, and then the 6 people who you call recommend that some kind of way it becomes a part of the discussion.
Absolutely, Ms. Johnson. There would be communication of the work group to all board members.
And that their position is reflected in the comments that are made at the legislature.
If that didn't happen, I imagine the board would replace the members of the work group.
Or some other people.
Yes, yes. I think there's some accountability built into this process where the work group would be responsible to communicate to the other BESE members and to be responsive to all BESE members to the best of their ability. I think, and if the work group represents a lot of different perspectives on the board, then that will happen.
No. Well, I want to make clear, though, that if there's a new piece of legislation, that the 5 people may decide that that's a positive, and then when they talk to us, that there are some other, and that is reflected. That's all I'm trying to get, is that the legislature truly understands that the comments reflect 2 sides of an issue.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it won't work. Okay, Mr. Bayard.
Yes, Mr. Meyer, as long as the legislation that's proposed upon the amendments, as long as that legislation doesn't change, the intent doesn't drastically change, then I think most BESE members would not have a problem with it. But if the amendment is drastic and in essence changes the whole intent, then discussion is needed, just email discussion or cell phone discussion. I mean, you could call me and say, what do you think about this? Because prior to this administration, Mr. Picard did a lot of that on legislation, and it worked okay. So I really don't have a problem with us having inter-board discussions and with you guys when the bill's on the floor, especially on such legislation that it was fairly clear that this board was behind it, 9-2-8-3. But on other bills where it's very tight, 6-5, then it creates issues that communication can eliminate. So that's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bayard. Ms. Gibbons?
This is, excuse me, this is one of my concerns. As an elected board member, I think I have an obligation to represent the interests of my community in these decisions that are being made about positions on legislation. The other thing that I'm concerned about is that quite often we receive public comment from the general public at these meetings as to the positions that BESE should take and why they feel that way. If we do all of this in work groups, where do we provide for public input? And I think it's incumbent upon us as a board to allow the general public to have an opinion and express those opinions about the decisions that we're making. And at some point, I think we need to have a meeting during the legislative session like we've always done to discuss legislation. Now, if that legislation has been reviewed by a work group that makes a recommendation to the board, fine, but I don't understand how we can make decisions about legislation without airing those decisions or the process in public.
Okay, Ms. Gibbons, even if the board as a body takes a position on a piece of legislation, that does not prohibit an individual BESE member from going to the legislature in front of committees. In fact, it happens all the time, to express an individual's position. And then secondly, the board has a process for public comment that public comment, in fact, you receive emails every day from the public on issues. So we do have a process that public comment can be communicated to all BESE members, and that can be part of their discussions. I don't think this process removes that ability of the board to hear from the public before they take a position on legislation. Anybody else?
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Lee.
I would think that any position taken by the committee should be reported to the legislature at the time of testifying, that this is a report of the committee and not of the board.
That could be considered. Yes. Ms. Buquet.
Thank you. I was going to point out several things. I think that this is this is for this year, right? That we are looking at this because we don't have as many meetings. I'm sure if there is a hot button issue, any board member can request a special meeting to discuss it, so we can do that. It is a fiscal session, so we hope there won't be as many education subjects to review, but it seems to me, again, whenever we have a hot button issue, my phone and my emails are full. I think the public really does let us know when there is something that they're very concerned about, but I just want to point out that we can call a special meeting at any time, and next year when it's a full session, I think we should consider having a planned special meeting and do it that way. And also in regards to Mr. Lee's remarks, I think whoever goes to the table can also report the vote, not just that it is committee, but if we've had a vote, and you can say what the vote is, so that when you're reporting it, you could say BESE had a 4-7 vote or whatever it is on this. So I think that would give us some
I mean, board members, I would encourage you to support the proposed process. Let's see if we can make it work. Let's try to iron out the kinks. If you're interested in serving on the working group, please let Ms. Posniak know. And let us try to make this work. And if it doesn't work, then we'll regroup and we'll try something else. Is there a motion on this item?
I think we have. Don't we have a motion in a second?
No, we do not. We started the discussion first.
I'd like to make a motion, but before I want to be clear, Ms. Bouquet, I don't think they can say something about a vote. No. I just want to be clear to the audience that if they call us, this is not a vote. Please understand that, because we can't do that. If we take any vote, we have to do public notices. So there will be no voting.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know
you're right.
previous votes that we've taken on positions, but we would not be voting as a
You're
working
right.
group.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for the clarification.
And I move, we move with this.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the recommendation as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Bradford. Any?
I'll make one more comment.
Yes,
real
Mr.
quick.
Romer.
I mean, I think it's a useful tool, and we do need to see if it works properly. I mean, I know the speaker could tell us that often legislation is filed that is fairly innocuous, that's a skeleton piece of legislation, but as it goes through the process, they amend it, and it becomes something much greater than anticipated. And it gives them the flexibility that when we first see a bill, we may think we don't either want to take a position or we want to oppose it, and it changes drastically. And I think this hopefully will better serve our intentions as that process happens and give the department the ability to deal with that transition. So I'm hopeful this process will work. I think it will actually lead to a better representation of our policies in general, and we don't have the fear of a bill becoming something different than what we intended and then having to call a special meeting. So I second the second, if I can do that.
We have a motion in 2 seconds on this item. Any opposition?
Madam Chairman, I just have one question.
Yes, Mr. Bayard.
Will the working group constitute or be a BESE committee or just a working group?
No, it would be, right now, we have a couple of working groups essentially of the board, and as I understand it, state boards across the country use working groups, members that are willing to
So
devote
it's not
extra time to an issue.
It's not a public meeting?
It's not a committee, no. It would be, we would work with the members who want to engage in this process and figure out what the best mechanism is. It could be some email, some face-to-face meetings. We'll figure that out once we figure out the composition of the work group. Okay, you're opposed, Ms. Gibbons?
I have a question. No,
Okay, one more question, and then we're going to move on
I'd
this.
like to know then, since we have changed the structure somewhat of these committees, who then becomes responsible from the department and from the BESE staff to do the work that we have done? And Chris, I don't think you've been a part of this activity, where we go through the legislation and reduce it so that it can be presented to BESE without having 32,000 sheets of paper. And Patrick, Brad, and I have worked on that for the last 3 years, so that when the board sees these recommendations, there are meaningful pieces of information without all the verbiage. And one of the things and I guess I'm volunteering for this work group, one of the things that I think is incumbent upon us while we adopt this new policy is to keep the old things that are working, so that next year as this legislation is filed, Brad, I don't know Joe, I know you're in the process, and maybe Patrick, to make sure that the board gets the digest that we're looking for to make decisions as to our position.
Yeah, I think the board is comfortable with the format that the department uses when they come forth with the recommendation. It usually includes a bill digest, it includes previous board positions, and includes a recommendation. I might include some legal kind of advice on it. So Ms. Gibbons is saying is absolutely correct. There's been a lot of effort to build something that board members can make a good decision based on, and we'd like to continue to use that format. The working group wants to be able to use that. Is that clear?
Can you hear me volunteer for the work group?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Ms. Gibbons is definitely on, and I think I saw Mr. Bennett raise his hand. No.
He's pointing
Okay.
at me. He's pointing at me in case you want to know what he's doing.
Okay, board members, please let Ms. Posnick know if you're willing to engage in this effort. Hearing all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Item 11A, AG Master Calendar of Events, consideration of AG statewide program proposals for FY 2011-2012, items 1 through 5.
Okay, Ms. Jenkins. Board members, if I can just take a moment and just really recognize and thank Ms. Robin Jenkins and Robin and her staff for doing just an incredible job with the compressed time frame. As you recall, that we did all the approvals in one in order to give everyone the most amount of flexibility, and Robin, you have done an outstanding job, and we are very, very appreciative.
And please, I do want to thank the department because they also worked very hard to get these proposals to us.
I
so
saw
we
that. That
could
was
come.
very nice of you. Thanks.
Yes, I mean, they really, really hustled to get this
Okay.
done.
Great things happen.
Okay, so today we have 5 statewide proposals that are up for your approval today, and I am recommending approval on all 5 of them. We have the Louisiana Renaissance Language Immersion Program, which you'll remember is a new program this year that was requested by Senator LaFleur. Louisiana Virtual School, TAP, Everybody Graduates, and the Louisiana School Turnaround Specialist Program. Now, the Renaissance Language Immersion Program, we worked out a deal with the 8G work group that I could go ahead and approve that provisionally and then have y'all approve it later, give final approval to it because they had a time frame that they were trying to follow, and with the new BESE meeting schedule, it wasn't jiving. So
Right.
that's how we handled that one. So I'm asking for final approval on that. Virtual School, TAP, and Everybody Graduates are basically the same as they were last year. There are no substantive changes. Louisiana School Turnaround Specialist Program, there is a substantive change. They did add a component, which is the leadership program, and that is where they're going to train a cadre of turnaround specialists that they can put in watchlist schools in years to come. So I think all of those are in order.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Is there a motion to
So moved.
approve? Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
I'll second.
I get a second by Ms. Givens. Any opposition to the motion?
Let Mr. Bennett say second.
Okay, Mr. Bennett seconds. Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Let me back up a minute. Is there any opposition to the motion? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Item 12, consideration of LDE, SSD, and BSS contracts and leases for action and special consideration. The recommendation is to approve.
Is there a motion on the floor? Is there a motion? Ms. Johnson, as finance chair? We're on page 69.
I have a question.
Let me get a motion on the floor, and then I'll recognize you, Ms. Givens.
To approve.
Okay, I have a motion by Ms. Givens to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Bradford. Ms. Givens, you have a question?
This contract with LSU, that's on page 70. I understand with their extent that you're extending the services. The question basically is this a competitive thing, or is this a sole source contract?
If you look at the chart, it's under competitive process. It says no, it's an interagency agreement. Is there anyone from the department, finance area, that can speak to it? Okay, please identify yourself and.
Well, I'm trying to figure out the contract really doubles. Is this something that we did not foresee when we did the original contract? Or these new opportunities that have developed that are causing us to need to go back and up the contract by $600,000?
Yes, in the original contract, we recognized that all the activities that were approved originally with this contract with OSEP, and we were required to have the PTI and different family organizations that are part of our agreement with OSEP to implement the contract policy. And we recognized that all the activities were not completed, so we did inquire of OSEP to ask for a low-cost extension to complete all of those activities. And we did see where that comes in.
Okay, I understand. It just seems a little odd.
Okay, are
That's
there
a
any
lot
other?
of money.
Okay, we have a proper motion and second on this item. Is there any other questions? Any objections? Motion carries. Next item.
Item 14, consideration of RSD contracts and leases for action and special consideration. The recommendation is to approve.
Okay, board members, we're on page 121.
I move approval.
I have a motion by Mr. Romer to approve. Is there a second?
Second. Question?
Second by Ms. Johnson. Question, Ms. Givens.
Last year when we decided at some point to change the days that that leave was being given, we were told by the department that this would cause, in fact, we were told by Scott Norton, that I don't see in the audience.
No,
that
Mr.
this
Norton
was
is
gonna-
in New Orleans today. I've been advised.
Can somebody tell me, did we experience the tremendous bump that we said we were told was going to happen because we changed the testing dates? Do you remember that, Ms. Tyler?
Tremendous bump.
Yeah, yeah. One of the reasons we were told that we shouldn't do it was because it was going to really cost the cost of our contract with these people to go up. And I just want to know if it did, and if so, how much.
Okay, I think we have
I'm just trying to understand the question. You're saying that by having two separate administrations of tests, that somebody said there was going to be a tremendous bump?
Not somebody, Scott Norton. I know exactly who said it. And that's what I'm asking.
Are you prepared to answer? Are you prepared to answer that question?
Is this a different item?
Huh? Where? That's this item. What page are you on?
Yeah. We're on RSD contracts, item 14. Let's go ahead and try to get Ms. Gibbons' question answered.
Is this? Okay. And that is what I'm looking at. That's not the item we're on?
No, ma'am.
Oh, I apologize. I'm on the wrong item.
Right. Okay.
You're here.
Okay, but Ms. Gibbons, let me dispense with this item, and I think you may be referring to a previous item. Do I have a proper motion and second on this? Is there any objection to moving on this item? Hearing none, motion carries. I believe Ms. Gibbons is referring to page 70. If board members, we're going to go back to page 72. I need a motion to reconsider. Are you going to want to reconsider this for discussion?
Yes, please.
Okay. I have a motion to reconsider by Ms. Gibbons, a second by Mr. Romer. Ms. Gibbons, please restate your question, and then we'll try to get an answer.
We were told that if we change, remember there was a discussion about changing the dates that LEAP was given, and it was involved with the Easter holiday, I believe. And I think the superintendents came to us and requested the date change. The department's answer for not supporting that request was that it was going to cost a lot more to have those tests graded because we were compressing the turnaround company to DRC. So I'm looking now that we're amending their contract by $44 million, and I want to know whether or not we did incur the increase in cost, and if so, how much? And is that what is this exactly about?
The rescheduling of LEAP, that would be a Scott Norton, but I can tell you what this amendment is.
Okay.
There we go.
We got a special consideration from OCR and state purchasing to extend and amend the current contract because of the consortium of 25 states that were going to come together and redo the LEAP testing so that everybody is comparing apples to apples on all 25 states. That instead of trying to bid a new testing vendor and maybe get different so that we're not
leveling the playing field.
We're not comparing the same test results across years.
Yes.
Because the consortium starts in 2014, we ask that we be able to continue with the current vendor until 2014 so that we get a level testing all the way across. When we see what our children are really doing, then in 2014, they'll have the consortium and it'll be 25 states that will come together, do one test, and everybody will test their children on the same level.
Okay.
So we didn't want, to change and possibly skew the results that we were getting. And that's why this amendment is in here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbons. Ms. Johnson.
Just to make some comments. Scott brought this discussion to me some time ago that we were going to do this. This is an appropriate amendment to this particular contract because of where we are in terms of where we are in the consortium. And so this is an appropriate amendment. We really I guess, verbally listened to Scott say if we're going to move with the other states, we need to have that transition time. And so I was kind of looking for this. I knew it was coming forth. He had made mention of it.
Right.
And so this is a very appropriate amendment at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so since this is a reconsidered item, I need a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
Thank you, I have a motion by Ms. Givens, a second by Ms. Johnson. Any objection to approving this item? Hearing none, motion carries. We go back to the agenda.
Item 15, consideration of revisions to non-public bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for Non-Public School Administrators, to include religious studies courses for TOPS.
Okay.
The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
Mr. Bennett? Okay, Mr. Bennett makes a motion to approve as notice of intent. And Ms. Bradford seconds. Any objection to this motion? Okay, he calls for the question. Hearing none, motion carries.
Are they going to be in the biology textbooks?
That's going to happen in 2012.
Read the course description.
Okay, next item.
Item 16, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 111, the Louisiana School District and State Accountability System to comply with December 2010 RSD Transfer of Schools Policy Adoption. The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
Okay, board members, is someone presenting on this item?
16.
We're on page 147. Mr. Meyer.
Chris Meyer from the department. This is just the technical language to support what you've already endorsed as your policy position on the RSC schools.
Okay, so the recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
I move approval.
Thank you, Mr. Romer. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Bradford. Is there any discussion? Any objection to the item?
I object.
Please note, Ms. Givens is objecting to the item. Otherwise, motion carries. Thank you.
Item 17, consideration of a report on types 2, 4, and 5 charter contracts and requests for amendments. The department has requested for item E to be deleted.
Okay, let's first get a motion to delete item E. Is there a motion? By Ms. Bradford. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Romer. Maybe we should have the department explain your motion to delete item E. I think Ms. Johnson would like that explanation.
Sure. Item E was initially a motion to allow PIC to amend their charter contract from McDonough 15. I'm sorry, I wasn't on. To discontinue offering LA4 program at their school. What we've determined is that actually is not a material amendment since the LA4 program is not part of the minimum foundation program in terms of school funding. And so we have removed, or we're proposing to remove that item. I will note, though, that the spots that they are giving up are actually going to another charter in New Orleans. Renew charter organization requested 160 pre-K spots, and right now there are only enough statewide to offer them 77. But they were being offered 50 before KIP decided to discontinue their program.
Question. I'm sorry, I had received something on that earlier.
Okay, let me start with Mr. Bayard and then Ms. Gibbons.
Yes, Mr. Landry, Edison Learning, was the contract time specific as to we could act at any time or the contract had expiration?
Mr. Bayard, if you would indulge me, we are not on that item right now. We're looking at.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're looking at deleting item E, and then we'll go to the other charter amendments.
I was kind of jumping out of. I apologize.
That's okay. I'll recognize you first when we get there. Ms. Gibbons.
Thank you. Mr. Landry, McDonough 15 is a school in the French Quarter, and Renew schools that will take these spaces will be where?
I'm not certain where Renew is going to run its pre-K program.
Is it perhaps the program that's going into Reed?
Renew will have 3 campuses next year. They'll have Reed, and then they'll continue their Laurel and Live Oak campuses. But I'm not certain where they're going to place their
program. The question then becomes, the children that were served by KIP, what insurance is that they will be able to roll into the pre-K program wherever those spots are going? Or would those children it would not be a problem because those children are going to kindergarten? Hello, Mr. Gutierrez.
Good morning. Kevin Gutierrez with the Recovery School District. The programs, they're working closely with our early childhood staff so that any programs that are being lost are essentially made up through the community Head Start programs and or the charter schools or direct run operated schools. And we are doing so and taking into account the logistical placement of those schools. So we do have a fair distribution of LA4 programs throughout the city. So these particular programs are going to be made up between between the Renew Laurel Live Oak programs as well as one of our community-based federal title Head Start programs.
So the children that are presently enrolled in the KIPP school will have an opportunity to move to one of the other programs, or is that no longer an
those kids are going to roll up to kindergarten,
so
but the kids who previously might have had the ability from the immediate neighborhood to enroll in that program are now going to be given the opportunity to enroll in other programs.
There are no kids in the immediate neighborhood.
Well,
That's the French Port.
Sure.
But still, there may be siblings that are in the KIPP school, and that's why the parents choose to have their kids in that program. So if you could just tell me what's going to happen to those children and how you plan to let parents know that the program is no longer to be held at McDonald's at 15.
Sure. Our staff works very closely, just on a high level, with the Mahalia Jackson Early Childhood Center in communicating to parents across the city around our sort of portfolio of opportunities for the LA4 as well as the Head Start program. That is a new relationship that we began this year, and we are approaching that in a much more comprehensive fashion, and I'll be glad to pass on more information regarding that plan as it's finalized.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome, Ms. Gibbons.
We have a motion and a second to delete item E off of this. Is there any objection to that motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Now we go back to this agenda item,
Sure. And
Mr. Landry?
So would you prefer to address each amendment individually, or would you like me to go through all the amendments?
I'm hearing from Ms. Gibbons. We want to go item to item. Ms. Johnson, do you have a preference?
Well, I was just going to make a motion that we approve page A, B, and C, A, B, C, and D, that we approve those amendments because I think that's the appropriate thing to do.
Okay.
I'd also like to take personal privilege and say the 100 black men are in the audience, and they requested a material amendment to their particular contract, and it has to do with removing Edison as the EMO for that particular organization. And that seems to be, and having worked with them, the appropriate thing to do. And as I looked at all four of these amendments, A, B, C, and D, I would recommend approval of them. I'm going to make another recommendation.
Let me recognize Ms. Johnson's motion. I have a motion to approve items A, B, C, and D. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Mr. Romer. Any discussion?
I have a question.
I have questions, and I might offer a substitute.
Okay, but I'm going to recognize, actually, I told Mr. Bayard I'd recognize him first because he wanted to speak to this earlier, and then we'll go to you, Ms. Gibbons, and you'll have the opportunity to have your question and make a substitute motion. Mr. Bayard.
Just my question, Mr. Landry, with Edison, is a contract like one of these renewable contracts? Did it expire, or was it a specific performance issue? Which I know the specific performance issue is present, based on what I read in the Wall Street Journal a few months ago, but anyway.
We have the board chair from 100 Black Men here with us, so I'm going to let him address the specifics of the contract.
Honorable board members, I'm Winston DeQueer Jr., and I'm the chair of the 100 Black Men Charter School Board. The Edison contract had a 30-day out in it. It actually had a term that was longer than the period with which we let them work. But we used the 30-day out clause. There was a 30-day notice provision that we used.
Upon discern, though, you could revoke the contract if they weren't doing what they were supposed to do, right?
Yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, that's what I want to hear. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Gibbons.
Right.
Mr. Bennett, do you have a question?
I just want, he didn't tell us who else he was.
I am a former student of Mr. Bennett. He was my principal.
Journey, how you got to be alone?
You know, Mr. Bennett, that was absolutely shameless.
You also have a
student with Mr. Bennett.
In all these years, I've been
Mr. Bennett, we will definitely take care of that and remove the students.
He raised me and my brothers from pups.
Well, no wonder you're so impressive. To me.
A distinguished graduate. A distinguished graduate.
Okay.
We do have
Thank you,
an
Mr.
extensive
Bennett.
remediation program, though. We'll talk about that.
And I've been blaming their parents.
And I would like to thank Mr. Bennett and other BESE members for some comical relief. This is not an easy meeting today, and it feels pretty good. Ms. Gibbons.
I'd like to move that we do separate A and B from C and D because there are different kinds of amendments, and that I move to to approve A and B at this time.
Okay, I have a substitute motion to approve items A and B. Ms. Johnson will accept that, so I think
You
that...
can make it the major motion if you want to.
Okay, so she's withdrawn her primary motion. The new motion is to approve A and B, the Capital Pre-College Academy for Boys and Girls. Is there a second to that motion? Ms. Johnson, any objection? Motion carries. Now we move to C.
All right, Madam Chair.
If you're going to, let me give the department an opportunity to explain their amendment, and then Ms. Givens, and I'll recognize you first.
So New Orleans College
Landry.
Prep Charter School was authorized by BESE as a Type 5 in 2007 to open grades 6 through 12. In 2009, they requested a contract amendment to expand to serve grades pre-K to 12. In their initial projections for enrollment, they had the establishment of their 5th grade class to occur in the 2012-13 school year. But instead, in order to serve their rising 4th graders this next year, they're requesting to move up the year of implementation by 1 school year and serve 5th graders next year. This will not require any change to their enrollment numbers because they plan to shift some of their 6th grade spots to the 5th grade.
Madam Chair, I move
Ms. Givens,
approval.
thank you. I have a motion by Ms. Givens for approval. Is there a second? By Mr. Romer. Is any objection to this? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Lafayette Academy, this item actually has changed slightly since the original exec rec, and we provided copies to BESE staff this morning.
Okay, BESE members, do you have the new item? And I'm going to confess and take some responsibility for this. In knowing that there would be some uncomfortableness with the request with the pre-K, I believe the board and the leadership of the school went back and tried to come up with a solution that would allow them to continue to serve those children. And so that is the reason for the late amendment. I take full responsibility.
Madam President?
Ms. Givens.
First of all, wherever he is, I'd like to commend the school leader for this amendment.
Mr. Landry, are you here?
Where is Mickey?
Yeah.
Hello, Mickey. You'll get to live, because I know where you live, okay?
Come on up. It sounds like it's going to be a pleasant experience.
It's going to be a pleasant experience. Even when she's beating me up.
You've never done that yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I was about to, but
thank you.
But I really want to thank you for coming up with a way to keep your pre-K4 program intact, and I think that's the kind of creative thinking that we need to make sure that all of our children are served. We just had a discussion where a school is giving up its pre-K program, and as we keep saying, pre-K education is essential to the success of a child. Every time somebody tells me they're giving up seats, I want to know why, and what are you going to do to help us put those seats somewhere else. So thank you, Mickey.
If I can speak to that a little bit.
Yes, sir.
We lose $3,250 per student on pre-K. That's a total of $130,000 a year that we've been floating that program. We have our parents now involved with contacting legislators to fully fund that program, which when we think about it, it's ridiculous that it isn't. We have 40 slots for pre-K students. We always have over 200 applications for those 40 slots every year. We can only take 40 because that's the only spots we have. This is my 4th year at the school, so the oldest students in our school for whom we had pre-K are now in 2nd grade. We had 40 of those students in pre-K. We still have 38 of those students.
Wow.
2 of them moved back to Houston. Of those 38 students, when we take Dibbles tests and DRA tests, 30 of the 38 are in the top. They're at the top of the 100 students performance that we have for 2nd grade students. So the statistics are staggering as to the effect of that program. We were struggling with trying to keep the program. And we were going to have to lose it because, as you all know, budgets are tight. Building insurance is a threat to us now.
and trying to make ends meet and keep our faculty employed and productive with those kinds of budgetary hits is very hard. We think we've come up with a solution of raising our enrollment cap. We need to have 8th grade. It's in our charter. Our parents want us to have 8th grade. Every year I hear that at graduation and long before. So we think it's a creative solution. We have been talking a lot with the Catholic Church folks down the street from us at the central office about finding perhaps an empty Catholic school building that we can work with them on. That looks promising. We have to keep investigating it, but that's what we'd like to do.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I move approval of item D as amended.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbons. Is there a second by Mr. Garvey? Any objection to the item?
No, Madam Chairman. I just want to say thank you, too, because the emails have been flying, and we really appreciate the solution.
I'm glad. The emails have been flying.
And also, Madam President, we
And
have...
if anyone hasn't been to Mr. Landry's Lafayette Academy, I'm sure Ms. Gibbons will be happy to take you there, and Mr. Landry will welcome us. So,
and also, I want to point out
Ms.
that
Gibbons.
we had a work group of school administrators, Kevin, you were there, at Mahalia Jackson to talk with our legislators about fully funding pre-K education. And I think the number that we came up with per year was it $8,000 or $9,000 per year is necessary to fully fund these programs. So we're going to be pressing, the local delegation has sworn to help us find the money to continue pre-K education in Orleans so that more schools can do it without putting themselves in risk.
Yes.
There was a meeting with legislators and charter school leaders and board members recently at Warren Easton. And I was thrilled to hear Senator Nevers advocate strongly for full funding of pre-K. And I hope he follows through with that. We're writing and calling him.
And it's not only, this is for every provider of pre-K. This is not just for the providers in the charter schools, but our districts have to supplement the same gap for pre-K. And as a board, we have set this as a emphasis and a mission and a priority along with the Department of Early Childhood. And we ourselves I think, have some responsibility to advocate for full funding of pre-K also.
One of the things that makes it difficult for a freestanding charter to fund pre-K is that it does not have as much room to spread the cost.
Yes.
And so in a district, it's easier to fund pre-K because you can spread those costs across the district. And when you're just a school operating by itself, then every dollar counts.
And if we can expand our enrollment cap, we can spread the costs. We're still going to need to raise about $50,000.
You do that so well.
And I know where I'm going to get the money.
You know where Ms. Gibbons lives?
Yes, he does.
Okay, we finished with that item. Board members, let's move on. Thank you, Mr. Landry.
Item 17F, Kenilworth Science and Technology
Madam
Charter
Chair.
School. The recommendation is to deny.
Okay, Ms. Johnson.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Kenilworth Science and Technology Charter School, adding grade 9. The information I have says to add grades 9 and 10, but I'd like to add grade 9. And then, so the motion is to approve rather than to deny. So
Yes, ma'am.
So if I can get a second, then I'll speak to the motion.
Okay, there's a motion to approve
But you're amending it.
to basically, yes, to not accept the department's recommendation to deny, but in fact to improve their request, but only adding one grade, and that is grade 9. Is that correct, Ms.
That's
Johnson? Is there a second for this motion?
I'll second it. I'd like to hear from the administrator.
Okay. I have a motion by Ms. Johnson, a second by Ms. Givens, and we'd like to hear from the department.
Sure. The Kenilworth Science and Technology Charter School is is a charter school under the Pelican Educational Foundation. They do operate 2 schools in Louisiana, Abramson in New Orleans and Kenilworth and Baton Rouge. It's a Type 5 charter school, was initially part of the East Baton Rouge school system. They are in their second year of operation, so we have 1 year's worth of test data from the school. The school was hovering around 60. We have some data that if it were to have been assigned an SPS score in 2009, the first year of operation, based on the test scores of the previous year, it would have been at around a 64. They currently are at a 62.7 assessment index based on last year's test scores. We recognize that amending a contract to increase enrollment is a great tool to allow for increased opportunities for students who otherwise would attend a lower performing school. We recognize that it's a great tool to expand the impact of a high performing school, a school that has shown and proven that it can get great results, as in the case of Lafayette Academy that you guys, that the board just approved an expansion of, and in the case of Kip Believe, which was approved for an expansion at a previous board meeting. We feel that right now, given that we only have 1 year of test data on the school and that it's currently at a 62.7, that from the department's perspective and the perspective of maintaining very high standards for charter schools and for the expansion of charter schools, we would request that this item be addressed at a later date when we have more data with which to make a decision. It has been recommended by a board member that we consider deferring the item until we have another year's worth of test data, and I'll let board members address that. But the department would ask that we not approve this amendment at this time, given the fact that we really don't know whether the school is a high-performing school. We have run an analysis to look at where the 8th graders from the school are attending school now, and we've seen that there are only 10 students that finished out of nearly 100 students last year that attend lower performing schools. All the rest either attend a higher performing school, a charter school that does not yet have a score in East Baton Rouge Parish, or they've left the parish and attend other schools. And so for all of those reasons, we would recommend that this expansion not be approved at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Landry. I'm going to start on this end. I tend to be right. Mr. Romer, and then Ms. Johnson, and then Mr. Garvey, and then we'll go this way.
I appreciate your comments, and I've spent a great deal of time looking at this issue because I certainly agree that they've not yet met our goal of where we want our schools to be. There's no doubt about that, despite their efforts, and that we won't know yet if they get there. Time will tell. I will say this, while you are accurate in that most of these kids would have a better alternative, quote unquote, based on their score today, not all of them will. There will be kids, if we deny 9th grade, who will end up attending a school of a lower performance. There also would have to attend a school that doesn't have the same focus that this particular school has. I believe more than anything in choice, and I believe in giving parents a choice to leave one option to go to a better option. And in this instance, we will have kids that will not get the chance to go to a better option than where they currently are. And I appreciate that the vast majority of them might. You make a very valid point that of almost 100, 10 or so would have a lesser choice. I would ask you to do this. Put yourself in the shoes of those 10 parents who have to send their kid to a school of a lower standard and a lower performance. And are we being fair to those 10? I know this, if I were one of those 10, I would be infuriated. Now, I think we need to hold them to a high standard. I think they need to know that future increases in grade levels will be based on performance, that they do need to hit their growth targets, that they do need to perform. But for the sake of the 8th grade kids now, I'm thinking of the 8th grade kids now, we would be forcing some of them into a lower performing school if we don't grant them a ninth grade. And I have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with your ideal of a higher standard that we need these schools to achieve. I do have a problem telling a parent and telling a child that you have to go to a lower performing school. So I'm going to support, I'm going to go against the recommendation of the department, and I'm going to support granting a ninth grade for this school.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Romer. And next is Ms. Johnson.
Thank you very much. I think I've made it perfectly clear to this board that I'm a lover of pre-K-12 schools, and the reason is very simple. I happen to like for the environment to be consistent. Therefore, if you have a 6-8 school, and I've been there and I've established a relationship, and I know people and they know me, and I'm at that school because that school has a particular interest, science and mathematics. So I chose to be in that school because I could leave. Then not to have me continue in an environment that has been nurturing to me seems to be ridiculous. And what we're asking here for is, as I appreciate it, is the 8th graders who are there who would like to continue would become the 9th graders. There are a number of things that we need to consider, and Jacob, you and I talked about this. Can we get a school performance score fast? I believe we can. We already know the attendance. We know the things that go into it. What we don't know is how they will perform on the test. And we will have that very, very shortly. So, and I know we can calculate it. After all the districts calculate it as soon as they get the numbers. So we can calculate this. And if the calculation proves that they are on an upward trajectory, then I think we're making a mistake if we deny this. And I happen to be a person who loves science and math, but I know what these children showed me with the robotics, with the amount of intense knowledge they had, with the fact that they were well versed in mathematics. I have probably spent more time at I do know this. I've spent more time at Kenilworth than I have spent at any other charter school in the state of Louisiana. I've been there just that many times. And I have had the opportunity to be in the classroom. I have actually talked to the students. I have asked them questions that I know the administration there probably did not want me to ask them, but I did anyway. So to say to us, you are here in the 8th grade and you have done well, and now we're just going to let you go. And now you have to establish, remember, it is about relationships. So now you need to go and establish you some new relationships. I don't think that's what we need to do. So I'm in support of adding the 9th grade. I amended it not to add the 10th. As you recall, I'm only adding the 9th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Garvey, do you wish to speak?
Yes. I had talked to Mr. Landry earlier today about the possibility of deferring on this item until the BESE June meeting. Mr. Landry told me that he was fairly certain that by the BESE June meeting we could have the new score calculated for this school, which I believe would show that it will meet the standard that would grant it to 2 grades. And I was going to make a motion to defer this until June.
Going to do it.
That's the end of my...
Okay, so but you're not going to make a substitute motion? Is that what? Would you like to listen to the other conversation?
I'd like to listen
I'll
to
come
the
back
rest
to
of
you.
the conversation.
Okay, and Ms. Gibbons, did you want to speak to this?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, 2 things. First of all, Ms. Johnson is very passionate about what's going on in Kenilworth. I've had an opportunity to observe the folks at Pelican operate at Abramson in New Orleans, and I know that they're very sincere, very hardworking young men. I also know that they operate other schools that are doing quite well. So I think that given time, they'll be able to straighten out whatever the difficulties are within the school itself. But I'm listening to you all talk about standards and looking at the SPS scores of schools in Baton Rouge, but yet and still when it comes time to expand schools in Orleans, you don't consider the same things. So I think the board needs to adopt standards that it lives up to regardless of where the schools are located. If it's good enough for Baton Rouge, then it needs to be good enough for New Orleans. And you have given several schools over my objection, and folks from Baton Rouge, I want you to know, because you're from Baton Rouge, I'm supporting your motion. and I wish you'd give the same courtesy to me when it comes time to deal with schools in Orleans.
Ms.
Thank you.
Gibbons, I think today in your packet is a recommendation by the department of such standards that you're asking for. And I'm going to ask Mr. Landry to speak to that at this time, because I think it's important and germane to this discussion. Mr. Landry.
Yeah, Ms. Gibbons, I think you make a great point. What we've seen is that these decisions are very difficult when you do have a group, or you may have parents requesting that additional choice. And so what we've proposed is to make the process as objective as possible, so that we can only look at standards and results when making a decision that's going to really impact the presence of a particular school. So included in a later agenda item as part of the Bulletin 126 revisions, we propose a policy that would take into account a number of factors whenever deciding whether to allow a school to expand grade level served and expand enrollment numbers. The first factor would be to allow the expansion if the school is at a C or higher on our accountability scale, but also allow an expansion if a school has made 10 points of growth over the past 2 years. And then an additional consideration is to allow an expansion if the majority of the students would have to attend a lower performing school if we denied that expansion. And we used those factors when analyzing this particular request, and that really was why we requested this issue. I also want to remind the board that this organization submitted a full charter application for a high school in the last request for applications, and they were denied by the board upon NACSA's recommendation for denial. And so this also factored into our consideration whenever we made this recommendation.
Madam Chair.
1 second, Mr. Romer, if you would let me, if you let me finish this way, we'll come back to you. Okay, Ms. Buquet. Okay, Ms. Gibbons, you finished? And then we'll go to Ms. Buquet, and then Ms. Buquet, and then Mr. Bennett.
All right, thank you. I like the idea of giving the approval, as Ms. Johnson said, for 1 year, and then as we get the grades, we can make the decision for the 10th grade. But I think waiting till June, as was suggested by Mr. Garvey, makes it problematic for the school to make their arrangements for next year. It just seems to me if I were going to plan a new grade, I need to let those parents know as soon as possible, especially if they are competing to get into another school that has better offerings for them and better SPS. So I would go with Ms. Johnson and her passionate appeal.
Thank you, Ms. Buquet. Mr. Bennett.
Well, I was in favor of the substitute motion that Mr. Garvey was going to make, but let me ask you, we're looking at Bulletin 741, and it has them listed. Does the school have any violations of legal or contractual standards as defined?
We did address an issue last year with the school's enrollment lottery, but they've since corrected that
Are they in dialogue with the department?
They are. Well, dialogue is actually a new term that we're proposing to use, but they don't have the financial concerns.
All right. Then have they met one of the following student performance standards? Do they have a label of C or higher?
They do not.
All right. Has the school made 10 points of academic growth over the previous 2 years?
We only have 1 year of data on the school because they're in their second year.
Okay. And in terms of allowing students, not allowing the expansion into new grades of acceptance of greater numbers of students will result in attending a lower performance school. You've already answered that question.
10 out of, so they had 128 eighth graders last year. A number of those have were either held back or left the parish, or any other issue, but only 10 are attending a lower performing school in East Baton Rouge Parish.
I have to agree with Ms. Gibbons. We have a standard, and if we make it for some and not for others, and if it's New Orleans and Baton Rouge, and I'm in Baton Rouge, and as much as I would like to grant this, at this point I really am in favor, and I understand it's an unfortunate circumstances in terms of the timing and the dates, but I really would like to defer this until June. And I know that makes it very hard, but there's new data that would come about at that time, so that would be my substitute motion.
Okay, there's a substitute motion made by Mr. Bennett to defer on this item until the BESE June meeting. Is there a second? A second by Mr. Garvey. So we now have a new motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion?
I have some
Okay, Ms. Johnson, are you going to speak to the substitute motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bennett. But as I read on page 153, specifically, the LDOE recommends this decision based on its proposed addition to Bulletin 126. So if this is new, this is totally new language that it is proposing. It's not basing this on the language that currently exists. So going forward, yeah, we would have a standard set up. We don't have it set up until we go, I think, on page 215 and make a motion to approve.
But Ms. Johnson, I mean, we're at this point putting, okay, we're in a position to be, it's evident. Mr. Romer.
And I would object to the idea that the standard of if a majority of the students are going to a lower performing school.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a responsibility to all the students in this state. And there are some students in this circumstance who will go to a lower performing school. Now, who does that serve well? I'm asking you. Does it serve those parents well? Does it serve those students well? No, the answer is no. Now, we don't live in a black and white world. This is an issue that you can argue on either side. Certainly, this board has been consistent on wanting high standards. I don't think it's the position of this board to force a child into a lower performing school. I don't think I've ever heard that from one person's lips on this board. Now, while it is a few number of students, if I'm a parent of that student, that's my child, and that's my child's future. And while I love the other 111 students at my school, my care is most about my child. I'm for choice. This is a school of choice. If a parent wants to leave it, they can leave it. If they're not satisfied with the school that they're in now, they do have alternatives to go to in East Baton Rouge. But there are some students that we know right now, their choice would not be as strong as the one they're in right now. And we're going to deny them that? I don't think so. I don't think that's the position this board wants to take, is denying a child a better opportunity than they currently have.
Okay, the superintendent has asked to speak to this item, and it's his turn.
So I want to be clear. I'm not sure that I agree with your analysis, Mr. Romer. There are options for all of those children. Those children could go anywhere. They choose to go to the schools they go to. So we're not forcing, excuse me, just,
they live in an attendance zone in East Baton Rouge.
Mr. Romer, I'm going to ask that you let the state superintendent speak, and you may respond afterwards.
And if they live in an attendance zone, Mr. Romer, then we ought to consider changing the attendance zone. But my argument is this, and it's very simple, and I'll just say it as simply as I can. You have to have an approach, and if you're going to adopt an approach that's consistent across the board, then we have to be careful about adopting this one case. We don't know what the standard will look like if we adopt this particular case. So what are we going to do with the standard that we're proposing next? We're going to have to throw that out, and we're going to have to make the standard then conform to this school. So I would really urge the board not to act on this today. It's not that I don't want you to act on it. It's not that I don't want you to approve it. But you've only got one set of tests. You will have that additional information by June. The board can then know what the standard it is setting by approving this particular extension. You don't even know because you don't have the information.
My standard is
You
very
won't
clear,
have it
and I'd like
until
to
then.
address
So
it.
I just would urge the board to defer until June, and then you can look to see what the results will be and whether it meets a standard that's suitable to you or not.
Okay. Thank you,
I'm gonna
Mr.
make one last
Superintendent.
comment.
Mr. Romer.
My standard couldn't be clearer. My standard could not be clearer. I want to give every child in this state the opportunity to go to the best school that they can go to. And I actually would support sending them a voucher if that meant that best choice was a private school. We're not considering vouchers today. We're considering this school, and we know for a fact some of these students will not have a better option than this one.
My standard could not be clearer. I will fight for every child, white or black, rich or poor, to give them the choice to go to a better school than the one they attend today if they choose to. And this policy would be contrary to that. We will be sending some kids to a lower performing school.
Call a question.
Okay, we're going to call the question on the substitute motion, which is to defer on this item until June. All in favor of the substitute motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
I need a roll call.
Mr. Bayard?
I'll vote yes.
Mr. Bayard votes yes. Mr. Bennett?
Yes.
Mr. Bennett votes yes. Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford votes yes. Ms. Bouquet?
No.
Ms. Bouquet votes no. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Ms. Givens?
No.
Ms. Givens votes no. Mr. Geis?
Yes.
Mr. Geis votes yes. Ms. Johnson?
No.
Ms. Johnson votes no. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Mr. Romer?
No.
Mr. Romer votes no. Ms. Testug?
I'm not going to vote.
Ms. Testug is not posting a vote.
How many
Okay,
yeas?
motion
How many yeas?
passes.
How many yeas did it have?
It has 6 yeses. Motion passes.
Okay, let me make a comment here.
So, yes, Ms. Johnson.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that on, as soon as we get the test data, I'm trying to see if I need to make a substitute motion, another motion here. As soon as we get the test data, we can give you the authority to allow this to happen, because you're doing what Ms. Bouquet said. It becomes very difficult to make a decision in June about staffing. And if we wait too late, that's what's going to happen here. We're going to have a real problem. So are you saying as soon as you get the information, I can make a motion here to say move forward?
Well, we're not going to get the information until June.
Well, we can get the information a little faster than June.
No, ma'am. You're
Okay.
not going to get, believe me, I've done this work for now 4 years calculating this data. It isn't usually available until October. Getting it by June will be the test results don't come back until the first week of June. So it's very difficult to do. It doesn't matter to me if the board wants to do what you're asking. I'm just telling you, you're not going to get results earlier than June.
Okay, I'm going to strongly advise that we try and get the results for this particular school earlier than the first week of June.
Okay, the board has made a decision on this item to defer until June. Mr. Garvey, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd
I'll
like to
allow
follow
it.
up on Ms. Johnson's idea and offer a motion that we allow the department to approve this school as soon as it gets the test scores back, if the test scores meet the standard that we are setting.
I'll second that.
So that BESE does not have
And
to
I'll
come back
support that.
in an emergency
And
meeting
I will offer an amendment to that.
Okay, well, let me see if I can get the motion stated so that it's clear to board members, and then we'll entertain an amendment. The motion is to authorize the department to approve the expansion of the school by 1 grade level. Is that or by 1 grade level?
by 1 grade level,
Subject to receiving the
as soon as it receives.
as soon as the school performance scores are received and they indicate that they have met the board standard. Is that correct, Mr.? Okay, and then do you have an amendment to that motion? Well, I need a second to that motion. Second by Mr. Bennett. Do you have an amendment to the motion, Mr. Romer?
I will accept all that language, but I want to add to that the same language that they have in their own recommendation now that refers to no student going to a school of lower performance. That if they get their score back, and we still know that these students will be going to a lower performing school, that we allow this.
Okay, so your amendment is that if the school meets the if it does not meet the standard, and there's the minimum of 1 child, if there's at least 1 child who would not be attending a high performing school.
It would result in students attending a lower performance school. It doesn't define it. If this results in the students attending a lower performing school, that it gets approval.
Are you removing the majority and saying any?
Where does it say majority on this page?
I thought you read majority.
Could we just say that it meets the proposed standards of the department?
Proposed standards? So
And
you said-
you'll have the
That's-
opportunity to
that's what you're
address what
reading.
those standards are in the Bulletin 126 discussion.
So if you wanted to make changes, that would be where we could make changes.
Can you withdraw your amendment and address those in the bulletin? But then, let's talk about this, BESE members. Now what you're doing is you're taking a specific circumstance and you're getting ready to modify a standard and a policy. Is that
Y'all can
wise?
vote- Let me make it clear. You can vote against my position. I'm not going to vote to send a child to a lower performing school. Okay? I'm not going to do it. Somebody else can.
Okay, does someone want to accept, Mr. Garvey, do you accept the amendment to your motion?
I'm not sure.
Board members, let's try to eliminate the sidebar conversations. Do you accept the amendment to your motion, to Mr. Romer's motion? Excuse me. Do you accept Mr. Romer's amendment to your motion?
I'd rather have it go through the regular voting process. And whether I accept it or not is irrelevant.
You're the maker of the motion.
According to Robert's Rules of Orders, he has to get a second to his amendment, and it has to be
Okay,
voted on.
I'm so sorry. Is there a second to Mr. Romer's amendment?
I second.
Okay, now, I have a proper second to the amendment. Mr. Garvey, do you accept the amendment?
But no, we need to vote on it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
But
thank
Madam
you.
Chair-
I stand corrected.
Madam Chair,
All in favor of the,
I wanna call
Mr.
a
Lee?
point of order.
Yes, sir.
Can't even hear.
Please help me, Mr. Lee.
I don't know that I can, but I'm going to try. Mr. Romer's amendment goes right back to the motion he made that failed. And to me, that's out of order
Okay.
for him to offer an amendment that does exactly what his previous motion failed on.
Is that correct? Okay, I'm going to rule that Mr. Lee is correct, and Mr. Romer, your amendment is not in order. So we go back to Mr. Garvey's motion, for which there's a second. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a request, please.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Gibbons.
Mr. Landry and Mr. Meyer.
Yes, ma'am.
I would like you to give me a list of all the amendments that have been made to school grade configuration in the RSD, and I'd like to have it for review as quickly as you can get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we go to the next item.
Item 18, consideration of the 2011 request for applications for types 2, 4, and 5 charters. The recommendation is to approve.
Okay, who's handling this for the department?
I'll give an overview.
Okay, Mr. Landry.
We are preparing to launch our most recent request for charter school applications. BESE is able to authorize types 2, 4, and 5 charters, and that's what this RFA will encompass. We have made a number of changes to bring the RFA better in line with NACSA's principles for standards and quality and authorizing. One of the biggest changes that we made to this year's RFA was to create a BESE application that will then be added to with addendums depending on the particular circumstance of the applicant. For instance, if an applicant wanted to apply for a Type 2 charter, they would submit a BESE application and then a Type 2 addendum. What that BESE application allows us to do is to compare equally what the core proposal is across all applicants. What it will also allow us to do, and we think our school districts will be grateful for this, is allow for a fairly common RFA to be used should a school district choose to adopt what the state does use. A couple particular items to note in this year's RFA are an expedited timeline for St. Helena Middle School. What we are proposing is to have a decision a couple months earlier on any operators that should choose to apply to run that particular school. Given the unique circumstances there, we want to give an operator enough time, or as much time as possible, to really build relationships in the community and work to get that school back on track. Another piece that's unique to this year's application has to do with the schools that are coming upon 5 years in the Recovery School District and that are eligible for return to their previous governing authority. And what we've decided to do in order to, once again, maintain some integrity across the review process, is incorporate that component into this RFA so that that BESE application can be the same. And we've added some addendums for a school district or previous governing authority that's interested in applying for that school. We plan to release a final list of eligible schools in July once we have some updated test results and once we have determined which schools are still going to be in operation in the following school year. And then we propose selections to run the same timeline as the charter school selection process.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. Are there any questions of board members? Ms. Johnson?
I have a question. On page 216, I would like to have some consideration for taking this particular statement out. Strongly weighs an applicant's ability to demonstrate prior success in raising student academic achievement. And
I
there's a
can't hear you.
Can you speak to the mic, Ms. Johnson?
It's on page 216, and it's the second bullet on the top of the page. It says, strongly weighs an applicant's ability to demonstrate prior success in raising student academic achievement. And what that does, in my opinion, is that it says if you've never run one, you're going to get 0, and if you have run one, you could get anywhere from 0 to 100, and therefore, it's not a level playing field.
I can address that. So it doesn't actually refer to have you run a school before. It says that the applicant can demonstrate success in raising student achievement. So imagine, so certainly, Ms. Johnson, I think this is a great policy conversation for you all to have. One of the things we're saying is if you're proposing to run a school, you ought to, whether you've run a school before, been a teacher before, you ought to be able to demonstrate that you've been successful in raising student achievement in some capacity, whether that be a classroom capacity, a school level capacity, and an oversight capacity of those who may run schools. But the application needs some proof. We would think you would want some proof as a board. Has this applicant been successful with students before? Now, that's something you determine. Again, this is just that it's a process to give you information so you make your judgment. But for us and what the national standards are recommending from NACSA and others, that this is the best proof of whether you're going to continue to get high academic achievement is have you gotten high academic achievement before. So that's why the statement's in here. But I wanted to clarify that it's not necessarily that you've run a school before, but the applicant needs to demonstrate. It's on the applicant to do it.
Let me clarify too, so that there's no confusion. I do not like this statement because I think it is unfair to people who have never operated a school. They may have demonstrated success. A teacher may have had all of her students to get A's in a classroom. That does not mean that that is absolutely success. So I think to put something in here like this, knowing you are going to weigh it, is something that I'm real concerned about. Because if you remember, just last time we met, we went back and we did something with how we were giving money. And the way we did it was all of the applicants who had operated programs before got most of the money. That's what happened, because they had a success rate. And those community groups that were at the bottom, when we first did this, got 0. So what I'm looking at is that this, to me, is the same thing. It is the identical same thing. So
Ms. Johnson.
That's my position on that.
Okay, I think you made your position clear. Board members, if you'll indulge Ms. Gibbons, she would like to speak to this, and then she needs to go to New Orleans. And so, Ms. Bouquet, do you mind if I
Oh, no, it's
allow
not
that?
an emergency.
Oh, it's not? Oh, okay.
You know, I'm saying she was asking if anything's wrong.
No,
Nothing's wrong.
I think
The
she's gonna
Secretary of
be,
Education is there, and I'm supposed to meet him at 1 something.
Ms. Gibbons is going to be joining the Secretary of Education, and I believe with the State Superintendent in New Orleans. So.
Quite quickly, Chris, I'm very glad to see this. I would like to suggest that while you are listing standards for applicants, that if there is a charter school that is presently in existence who is applying to take over more schools, that the same standards that you proposed earlier be applied to them as well. So I'm looking for them to have an average grade of C, their schools have to have demonstrated academic growth and progress, and so forth. But I think, we've had a lot of problems in the past about schools that have applied with no demonstrable success. And I think you're on the right track with this.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gibbons.
Thank you so much, and I'll see you all next month.
Not sure. We'll see.
Yeah, we're coming back next month. Oh, before I go there, if there's another item that is on the agenda concerning the merger of UNO
Gentili.
and
It's
Greater
on-
Gentili. I'd like to ask that that matter be deferred.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gibbons. Okay, Ms. Buquet, and then Ms. Bradford.
All right, is Ms. Johnson still here? Yeah, I had the very same concern when you say you're strongly weighting on applicants' ability to demonstrate. I understand where we're trying to go, but I sent an email out to the BESE members looking back when we started this journey, and none of us were very experienced, to say the least. There were several community groups that have proven themselves and were recognized at the HPHP event last week, but they would not have been able to prove this the way that it's written. And I would not vote for this unless you reword it. It's one thing for you to say, oh, well, it means the teacher or it means the principal. That's not what this says. I cannot vote for this whole thing until this paragraph is changed, because it strongly would send a signal to me if I were trying to open in a school that I didn't have a chance. And that's not what we want to have happen.
Thank you, Ms. Buquet. If Ms. Buquet, Ms. Johnson, if you want to think of some possible substitute language for this as we go through the discussion, that might be helpful. Ms. Bradford and Mr. Bayard.
Well, I kind of on the same page. I think it's just too broad. And I mean, I think getting more specific about it, you understand in your mind what you're thinking, but then how it's going to be interpreted in every
Right.
situation is not clear.
So what we could do is we could say, I mean, again, you become the ultimate decision makers on whether a charter is approved or not, and you'll determine what weight you want to provide. We could simply say that we're going to ask that question. Can the applicant, in the application, we would ask the applicant to demonstrate prior academic success, and then you all would decide whether that demonstration was sufficient.
You'd also have to make it clear, though, that you don't mean the president of the board. You mean more likely in a community, it would mean the principal they plan to hire and the personnel, not me if I'm starting the school. You would have to really make it very clear.
So what if we just say ask for?
Well, let's listen to Ms.
I don't want to start writing now while I'm
No, I know.
If they get nothing, that is a penalty for a new startup. So it's more difficult than it just seems than writing this one statement of paper as we're proving.
I'm going to take a little bit of privilege, and let me suggest that perhaps we could defer on this item, keep working, defer like for about until the end of the agenda, and then maybe we could get a huddle, and you can come back with some proposed language that would substitute this line, because otherwise this is not going to get approved today.
Madam Chair, I
Mr.
do want
Bayard.
you to know that we feel strongly that that should be in there. We're not saying we don't want that. We do want that. We just want it defined so that it's an equal playing field.
Mr. Bayard, is that along the same lines?
Kind of, but I'll be a little bit more specific. My concern, I have looked at applications. We used to get them, if you remember, really stacked up, and a lot of the answers were the same. Well, in the case of the same applicant for more than one school. But my concern has always been who, not an organization, but who. John Doe, he's a retired principal from XYZ school. He's got 20 years classroom experience, yada, yada. That's the kind of stuff I like to see, because I want to know who's going to really be the nuts and bolts people of the organization. And sometimes we don't get enough of that to make us feel comfortable.
Thank you, Mr. Bayard. Is there a motion to just defer on this item to the end of the agenda, and then let's see if the department can bring some language back that's more acceptable to the board? A motion by Ms. Buquet, a second by Ms. Bradford. Anybody opposed to that? Okay, we'll revisit this in a few minutes. Next item.
Item 19, consideration of a policy to allow elementary and middle school charter schools, with the exception of Type 2 charters, to voluntarily establish neighborhood enrollment preferences consistent with Act 756 of the 2010 regular legislative session.
Okay.
The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
Okay, board members, if you'll, I think it would best serve all of us if we allow the department to make a recommendation, and then we'll ask questions. And we do have a public comment card on this, and we'll do that at the end of questions.
We considered a lot of different options in which direction to go with this particular recommendation. We decided to stick very close to what the law actually says, and you're getting copies of the actual law right now. The law does allow for all types, with the exception of Type 2, elementary and middle school charter schools, to propose a neighborhood enrollment zone. And we believe that this is a direction that we're comfortable heading into. Our biggest concern for Type 5 charter schools is that the larger the percentage of enrollment is reserved only for kids in the neighborhood, the less options that parents have outside of that particular neighborhood. And our greatest concern is for the parents that don't happen to live in a neighborhood with a high-quality school option right now. Ideally, we will reach the day, and we're confident we will reach the day when all communities do have access to a high-quality school option, but we recognize that that's not necessarily the case right now. And so we did ask that we reserve only up to 20% of a Type 5 school's enrollment for this particular neighborhood zone. And then beyond that, we do plan to set up some parameters for what would be acceptable in terms of a proposal from a Type 5 charter school.
Okay, thank you. I imagine there are questions on this or a motion, but we do have 2 public comment cards, so we'll, if the board members don't have questions, I thought you might. Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Romer?
I'll just move approval.
Okay, let's get a motion on the floor. I have a motion to approve. Is there a second? Motion by Mr. Romer, second by Ms. Bradford. Ms. Johnson?
Mr. Jake.
We're on
Mr.
item
Landry.
19, but I'm not moving on it. Why? The motion is to approve. That's not the recommendation. The recommendation is no. Is it approved as notice of intent?
I guess it would be, because it's also part of our Bulletin 126
That's not how
revisions.
it's written, but Mr. Romer, will you amend your motion to approve as notice of intent? Ms. Bradford accepts that. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have some concerns now. Before somebody tells me, explains to me one more time what the law is, I really do know that this is a law that talks about the neighborhoods for those charters that exist in that are Type 5. I already know that. So with the comments that I'm going to make are very simple. I think 20% is too low. Why do I think that? Well, I think it because if you have a pre-K 3 school, those pre-K kids are going to kindergarten. If they're in the neighborhood and there were 30 of them and they all moved to kindergarten, there are 30 slots for that neighborhood. Do I think that you ought to offer it citywide? Yes, I do. I think there ought to be some way that you offer access to the entire city. I am real concerned that this violates Brown versus the Board of Education. Why do I think it violates it? Because Linda Brown had to pass by a school to get to a school. All of what we do in education is based on that premise. Passing through that railroad yard to get to a school is what it is based on. So now you're telling me if you don't fall within the 20%, even though you live here, you need to go somewhere else. I cannot support that. I'm sorry. And I understand what this is. I understand what this law is, but I think we are setting a very bad precedent. Because in the future, now when we originally did the RSD, we have to remember, we had very few schools. We needed to have all this citywide access, which I absolutely agreed with. But now that it is basically stabilizing itself, there ought to be some way, some real way, and it's based on what Mr. Roma is saying, for a child who lives next door to have the same opportunity to go to that school. And I don't think the 20%, because just think of what the 20% of a pre-K class of 30, or the man who was here talking about the 40 slots, the 20% of 40 is 8. So you see, that to me is very, very difficult. And the complaints I get from New Orleans are, we are putting these children on buses and taking them away from their neighborhoods. I just think that we ought to be sensitive to this issue, and I really think those people who have legal minds ought to be really sensitive to this issue, because I believe it violates Brown versus the Board of Education.
Ms. Johnson, thank you. Mr. Bayard, Mr. Bayard.
Schools of choice in most cases, and I think if you look at every school district in the state, every regular school district, the school of choice is driven by neighborhoods of choice. People live where they want to go to church typically, shop, grocery shop, go to school. It's all part of growing up with a family. And I think in school districts, you have attendance zones on purpose. That's to give people who live there, and in cases of single bonding districts, the ones who pay for it, you give them first choice at the school. And other people who come, then the school district has to provide for them with additional buildings, instruction, etc. It happens throughout my school districts that it happens. It's there. They have a school of choice. In Calcasieu Parish, we bus somewheres around 400 children, young students, to Barb High School. And the school is busting at the seams, but they provide. They bring teachers, they build buildings, they get temporary buildings, and they educate them. So I just think neighborhoods ought to have the first choice at a neighborhood school, and 20% will not accommodate that.
Thank you, Mr. Bayard. Are there any more comments? Otherwise, we'll go to public comments.
I'll make one comment.
Mr. Romer.
I agree that the idea of a neighborhood school we generally like, and it does strengthen neighborhoods, and ultimately that's good. The only problem with that currently is not every neighborhood has a high-quality school. So this is trying to bridge the gap between going back exclusively to attendance zones and the reality of where we stand now, which is not every neighborhood either A, has a quality school, or B, has the type of school that a person would want. We have different types of charter schools. We have foreign language, we have science-based, different types. So this is trying to find a happy medium between the traditional concept of every child lives in an attendance zone and a new concept, actually, that we consider now, that every child is different. And some children need a different school than the attendance zone that they may actually live in, and different options. So I would support the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Romer. We'll go to public comments at this point. Karen Harper Royal.
Good afternoon. Thank
Good
you.
afternoon.
Ms. Dastiu, I just want to say that your staff did share with me the policy regarding the previous cards that I submitted, and I just wanted to ask you, I just want to state for the record that I have submitted cards on items B16 through 19 and also 24, and I read your policy, and it assumes that these items have previously been heard at a committee meeting. Some of them have not. And I'm just going to respectfully ask that I be allowed to speak on those items.
Okay. Board members, it is at the chairman's discretion, and there were Ms. Royal, who we all know very well, very engaged and an important part of our process, and I didn't mean for this. The chairman has discretion and on public comments, and because it was a board meeting, I had a different perception that we typically try to limit public comments in board meetings because we've had the comments in committee. I do acknowledge that this is a different circumstance upon contemplation, and I will allow that. Do you think, how much time would you need?
I'm not going to be very long.
Okay.
I just have a couple of
Okay.
brief points to make on each one.
I think you make a very good point. I was relying on the board, typically board meeting process, when in fact we didn't have committee meetings. So you make a very good point, Ms. Royal.
And just for clarification, and I recently submitted number 24. Do you want me to come back then?
Yeah, I'll let you speak to that. We'll let you speak to that one.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start with the one that we're on, item number 19, which is, I have some concerns about the 20%. I don't think that it was understood by many people that we were going to have a large number of charter schools that in effect replace neighborhood schools. Schools of choice, charter schools, almost assume that there will also be neighborhood schools. In New Orleans, we are busing kids to lower performing schools than the school that is in their neighborhood. That's not a good use of money. That is not good for children. I really appreciated Mr. Romer's comments regarding the Kenilworth School. He really fought for those kids. But we actually have kids who live in neighborhoods who can't go to schools, and I just want to see that same kind of passion. If we would just give kids first right of refusal to the neighborhood school, I think that that would help. And then those parents can make the decision if this was a high-quality school or not. But we have a lot of schools in New Orleans, and we're really wasting money and really wasting children's lives. I'm going to ask that the board consider studying this issue more in depth, and I would gladly volunteer to serve on some committee along with whomever else you want to appoint to look at this more in depth, because it really is deeper than you are getting a good understanding for. I'm also going to ask that you consider creating attendance zones for every RSD direct run school and for every RSD school that has been in operation longer than 3 years, so as not to interfere with their ability to receive the federal charter school funds. It would be good if you could just maybe delay this item so that you can look at it a little bit further.
May I just ask the general question, because I think, do we have the option of delaying this item, Mr. Landry?
No, and I'd like to take the opportunity to clarify as well. We actually would like the adoption of this particular item not as notice of intent, but as a process to use for the upcoming school year. The law does require us to put this into place for the upcoming, the 2011-2012 school year.
But will you speak to the bigger issue of attendance zones? I mean, I think Ms. Johnson's points are well made. Ms. Givens has made points at the RSD meeting. There is a bigger issue of attendance zones that really is broader and outside of this act, which the board is required to do something with now. So I think I would ask board members to sort of separate those two items, that there is a big issue, a bit of a long-term issue that will require a lot of input, like Ms. Royal said. And then there's today's issue, which is we need to have something in place. And let's remember that the statute says that charter schools may, not shall. So this is just to have a process in place if a charter school elects to come and ask the board, am I correct?
That's right.
To establish a neighborhood zone. So these are two different issues. Today, let's deal with the act. And then, because I don't think we can deal with what Ms. Johnson wants, Ms. Gibbons wants, what Ms. Royal wants today.
That's right. So to clarify, we're asking for both the 126 bulletin adoption of the May language, but we're also, while that's a notice of intent, because that takes sometimes, although your new executive director is doing a fantastic job of, and the BESE staff of shrinking that time to an appropriate, since you're meeting less often, it could take up to 6 months. So we're asking you also approve for it to take place in the interim, that this process could hold so that the department could recognize any material amendments to charter applications to their lottery process. So we're asking for both a Bulletin 126 change and you giving us the authority that if anybody meets this policy you approve and wants to change their applications to, or change their charter agreements to incorporate this into the lottery, that you would allow them to do that this year so kids can start next year.
I'll amend my motion to allow that interim authority.
So just to allow interim authority along with the approve as notice of intent. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Roy. And wait,
as required. Is that
okay. Board members, since I would like you to indulge me and allow Ms. Royal to speak to the other items, because I stand corrected.
I will be very, very brief.
I know you will.
Regarding item number 16 around Bulletin 111, I appreciate Mr. Roma's conversation about the Kenilworth School. And when you speak to giving children the opportunity, when you in this agenda item, the bulletin speaks to phasing out certain schools, and that those kids will be given the opportunity to attend higher performing schools. I just want to call your attention to the time, if you could give more attention to the timelines with that phasing out. Last year, Douglas High School was phased out. Children did not find out until the last day of school, and those kids did not get the opportunity to attend higher performing schools. They may have been higher performing, but they were still in AUS status. And perhaps some language needs to be changed to make sure that if a school is going to be phased out, those kids attending that school would be given the opportunity to attend a school that is not in AUS status, and that you give some more consideration to that timeline. Recently, parents at Carver and Gregory School, like the last 2 weeks, were told that their school is going to be phased out. The common application period ends today. If those parents did not know that they were going to have to look for a school until 2 weeks ago, they have been really disenfranchised. And remember, these are two of the lowest performing schools in New Orleans. Most of the higher performing schools in New Orleans that are out of AUS status are full. And so we have disenfranchised those parents. And so some more consideration to the timeline would be helpful in this situation.
Very good point.
For item number 17, briefly, I was really concerned about the pre-K issue. I'm glad Mr. Landry has found a way to keep his pre-K. And we all know what the data says about children having access to pre-K. Whatever we can all do collectively to get more pre-K slots, we need to do. Number 18.
This is the one that we're going to reconsider at the end of the agenda, but so it's good. Speak to it.
Quickly, you all had a conversation about prior school success, and that was actually what my comments were also. We have been given charters to schools that have no record, especially most recently, and I'm not going to name the school because this is not about school bashing, but an entity has received the charter to take over a charter school that previously failed. That entity has no record of operating schools and no record of prior success. And I really liked what I heard about the points that were made about if the entity has a C or higher, operates schools with a C or higher, and the rest of that conversation. And if we could just standardize that process even more, I think it would be a more fair process. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, next is Tara O'Neill.
Good morning. I'm
Good morning.
Dr. Tara O'Neill. I'm the policy manager at the Cowan Institute for Public Education Initiatives at Tulane. And I want to start by saying that we support the policy presented. We recognize the desire for neighborhood schools of some sort, and we recognize the benefits of neighborhood schools. And so we think that the policy presented today is a good step in the right direction. I have two kind of comments about the policy. One is pretty easy. The other is fairly complex, as you all have been talking about. The first one, we think that the department should provide more guidance to schools on how to implement this policy. We think ultimately this guidance should be incorporated into Bulletin 126. In the meantime, because of this compressed timeline, we think that the department should find other ways to communicate to schools. Some of the items that we think should be considered are, one, we think the schools need guidance on whether to consider their permanent location, their current location, or both, because many of our schools are not in their permanent location. We think that there should be in writing somewhere that if a school does set aside 20% of their seats and the number of applications from neighborhood students is less than that 20%, that they are not expected to leave the other seats vacant. I think that's everybody's idea, but I think that's the kind of thing that it's good to have in writing so that there's not any confusion. Other things, how should a school, for lack of a better term, publish its attendance zone? We think that parents ought to be able to know where they can go to determine with certainty whether they are in an attendance zone or not, be it a school's website or LDE's website or somewhere. They should, like I said, have some certainty that they have answered that question. I believe weighted lotteries is the way that they'll be implemented. We think the department should give some guidance on that. Our charter leaders and their business managers are crackerjacked in New Orleans, but there are errors when you get into things like probability and applying proper weights, and we think that it would just be good for the department to provide some guidance on that. And then just advise schools about things that they need to think about. If they have a sibling policy now, they need to establish how that sibling policy will be applied as part of a weighted lottery. All of those kind of details that really don't come up until you start to try to do the lottery. So that's my first point. The second point is that we think, to the extent that this policy is the one that stays in place, we think that the board and the department needs to commit to undertaking a comprehensive review of all of the attendance zones in a couple of years. Spatial things get really complicated. They're sometimes counterintuitive. You can't always make sense of things without really delving into the data. For instance, does the 20% number make sense? Well, it depends on how large your attendance zone is and how dense your population is. If you just draw a half-mile radius around a school in Gentilly, you're going to have far fewer students in that attendance zone than if you drew a half-mile radius around a school in the Lower Garden District. And so you don't really know whether you're getting parity between the number of students in your neighborhood and the number of spots you reserved. Attendance zones can reinforce or create disparities along socioeconomic lines, and as Ms. Johnson referenced, along racial lines. That's clearly a large context that needs to be considered very carefully. And I don't think we want to create a situation where some neighborhoods have a couple of schools that have included them in their attendance zone, while their adjacent neighborhood doesn't have any attendance zones. I think that what that would do over time is just create a further disparity of opportunity among students. And so I think the commitment ought to be, to the extent that we don't get a more comprehensive policy, that a comprehensive review of what does get done on this one-by-one, case-by-case basis be reviewed, like I said, after a couple of years, after a couple of schools have been approved for attendance zones. But generally speaking, we are supportive of this policy.
Thank you. I think it's a real challenge because under this policy, we're asking the charter school, if they bring a request, that they define their neighborhood zone. And I think Tara pointed out some very good points that depending on where you are, it could actually hurt rather than help. The only attendance zone that I'm aware of, or any zones that I'm aware of in New Orleans, is the planning zones that are within the master plan. And it seems like that would be a reasonable type of guidance, not necessarily put into this policy, but maybe as a guidance to schools. It's in the master plan for the schools. It is the only thing I know that I've been advised exists in New Orleans. So would that be something that y'all may consider as part of the guidance?
I'd say certainly.
Because it's large. The larger probably the better, in that you're not excluding. And yet there still needs to be flexibility, because if the zone splits a street or splits a block, how fair is that? This is a complex issue. I mean, Tara, I think, articulated it extremely well. I don't think it's something that's going to require a lot of work, attention from a lot of, and I don't think it can be decided today. That's why the guidance will be very important. Okay.
Concur.
There is a motion on the floor, a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Johnson.
This will be my final discussion on this. I won't bore people with it. I still hold to the 20% is too low. I really think you have to look at a school, and I was listening to what Tyra was saying, and she makes some very valid points. So I'm going to go along with some of the points. Somebody needs to give guidance. Somebody needs to say something rather than to have people come and tell us this is all we're going to do, or this is what I want to do. So there needs to be some real guidance on this. The second thing is, I'm confused with some of the language that I'm hearing. 20% of the neighborhood, or 20% of what the total enrollment of a school will be. So I'm hearing two different things here. I would hope that we're talking about a school's population and 20% being allowed to the neighborhood. Then I think that is, I still hold to that is too low, because I firmly believe that if you are a 5-7 school, the 5th graders go to 6th grade, you have all of the slots in the 5th grade open, and there ought to be some way to allow that particular class to have, and I agree it ought to be a preference, and if they don't fill them up, or they don't fill up a reasonable amount, and I'm not saying it has to be every seat, but if you don't have enough applicants to be reasonable, then of course you do citywide. But what we're doing here, in my opinion, is we're doing just what, and he really put it eloquently, we're saying some children are going to be left in schools that are really not where they ought to be, because we have this unfair way of allowing them to get into schools. And I hold to that violates Brown versus the Board of Education, no matter if you put the 20% in it. And I sure hope there are some lawyers out here who will look that up for me.
Ms. Johnson, the 20%, I mean.
That's right, you're doing
okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Is Mr. Bennett?
20% may not be enough, I don't know, but this is a start. We can tweak this. I think it needs to play out and see what happens, and then we can tweak it. Okay. I'm in favor of this motion.
Okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, Mr. Romer's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next item.
Item 20, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 126 charter schools, including revisions to charter application requirements, financial indicators, and accountability policy. The recommendation is to approve as a notice of intent.
Okay, is there a motion to approve as notice of intent?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Bradford. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Bucade. Board members, do you want any comments from the department? Or do you have any questions?
I would point one thing out.
Mr. Romer.
I would point out on page 234, item under chapter 19, item E3B.
Repeat that.
On page 234, under chapter 19, item E.
Okay.
3B.
Mm-hmm.
Articulates, I believe, my position,
It does.
which was what we debated earlier, which is that no child would be sent to a lower performing school.
An expansion to grades except
And I call the question.
would result in students. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve as notice of intent. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries.
Item 22, consideration of providing delegated authority to the state superintendent to enter into a cooperative endeavor agreement for use of the Louisiana School for the Visually Impaired Government Street property. The recommendation is to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bennett. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries.
We move to the emergency agenda, item number 24.
Okay, board members, we're on the emergency agenda.
Item 24, consideration of request for material amendments from the New Beginnings School Foundation Incorporated governing Pierre A.
Move to defer. I think this is the item Ms. Gibbons asked us to defer on.
Okay, I think we're clear on the item. I have a motion to defer by Ms. Johnson. Is there a second? Can we,
I'll second. I don't know.
a second from Mr. Romer, and let's hear from the department, please. What is?
Right. So, again, good morning, board members. So this issue is one that is actively being discussed and worked within the community. I think what could be potentially even better. This is proposing two things. One, UNO and its charter management group are potentially splitting. And one of the motions here is that there would be a material amendment to allow the split to occur. The second question concerns whether Greater Gentilly High School is merged with the UNO school, which currently exists on a different campus. This is an active conversation. It was an active conversation last evening at the dinner that Ms. Gibbons was a part of. One way board members could address this, because we are entering a time that if a change happens between now and June, you want that change to happen as quickly as possible so that students and families can make the right decisions and facilities can be aligned. So if the board's pleasure, we were recommending approval of both motions. The board could also direct the department to resolve this issue with the parties in an appropriate way. You could delegate that authority to the superintendent, who has been on record both in this community and with Ms. Gibbons, and now with our new RSC superintendent, to work this issue out in a way that is appropriate. And so that is one way you could handle this so that we don't get stuck with making a decision in June that could cause the schools to come together and lots of movement of students and children. So our original recommendation is to approve both the merger and to approve the dissolution material amendment to UNO New Beginnings. But you could also allow that as conversations continue, and this is active. I mean, there have been changes even of this morning, that we could work through this issue and come to a resolution that suits, I think would suit Ms. Gibbons and the other officials.
So what would the motion read?
So if you want that motion, I think the motion would read that the board delegate the authority to the superintendent to resolve both of these issues adequately or appropriately, and we could report back either to a working group with, of course, I would recommend Ms. Gibbons be a part of that, or we could report back through the board president and the leadership, whatever is your pleasure.
I have a question when Ms. Bouquet finishes.
Well, I can see the benefit of having the ability to resolve this during the interim period. I do think Ms. Givens would have to be a point person and engaged in this. So I don't necessarily want it to be the board president.
Okay.
But,
right.
Well, I'll try a motion. We have a motion on the floor?
The motion is to defer? No. There is a motion. There'd have to be a substitute
Then I have
motion.
a substitute motion. And I think this will get us where we want to go, that the board directs the department or gives the department authority to resolve the proposed UNO Gentile High School merger and request that it re-engage the community to reach an appropriate solution. I don't know if that means it doesn't come back to us and it doesn't say who would be working on it, but
Does something need to be added?
And I would, and just in that, I would remove the word merger and just allow us to resolve the situation. Certainly, if we
That would
can't
be
reach an
better.
agreement, we will bring it back to this board. So in June,
The
if there's some
UNO.
problem, but
But
in the
maybe,
interim-
and you could amend it to saying that we report back to Ms. Givens, and you can say the board president, and we'll report to the board. We do
All
something
right.
like that.
please add it as so said.
on both the contract and
No, we're not approving the merger.
no, we would just like to change that the department could have interim authority to resolve both of those questions on the contract and on the merger question, or on the high school question of both Gentile and UNO, and then we will report back to the board in June.
And make it report back to the board in June?
We'll report back on what action is
Okay.
taken, and you've got our guarantee
At
that
our
we will
next
work with
meeting,
Ms. Givens.
whatever it is.
Okay. Okay. Does that understand, everyone understand that? Are comfortable with it?
I'm
I need a
uncomfortable
second
with
motion, I need a second on that motion. Second by Ms. Bradford. Ms. Johnson, do you have a question?
Ms. Bouquet, I appreciate the motion, but I'm trying to really get, if I can, understand the issue. When we did a number of these schools, Capito and, I don't know, Nelson, they were attached to UNO. And UNO had to go out and create a body that would be, I guess you could call it the recipient for this, because of the way that this was done. And what I read with some information that was sent to me by, I guess by y'all, because it has to be, it seems as if what they really want to do now is to get out of the relationship with UNO. Now, I have some serious problems with that, because we violated our own policy when we allowed UNO to come to us with a letter that allowed us to do Nelson, and it was not the same process that we had always used. And because we also, this board back then considered that a relationship with a university was prime for doing something. And I know this because I was very instrumental in it. So to now, I'm a little uncomfortable with just allowing the department to do this. I would much rather have, and Ms. Gibbons asked us to defer, and I don't want to do something, she's not here. This is her district. I would much rather defer on this.
Okay.
I don't think this is time sensitive, because, I mean, they're meeting all over New Orleans about this issue. If it's not, then they're meeting in secret and they're telling me.
Ms. Johnson,
So,
I think if Ms. Givens were involved in the discussion and basically had the opportunity to express whether or not she supports the progress and the decision, I would believe that if she were here, that if given that authority, she might support this, but that's just a belief. Any other questions on this? Ms. Bradford?
Is this not a deferral of sorts, in that we're saying that the discussion should continue so that we get resolution that meets approval with the parties involved?
No, I think actually the recommendation implicit in that is that there would be some authority to resolve it, and then report to Ms. Givens, and I think it report to me, and then we'll share that with the board. So it would be like an interim authority. Let's be clear on that. Okay. I have public comment from, I have 5 people, and it looks like you are all with the same Greater Gentile High School. May I suggest that you ask one of the members to come forth and speak on your behalf? Who's going to volunteer? No, do you not want to speak? In that case, I'll have to limit your time. I think it might benefit you. That's what I would defer your time. Well, as been stated earlier, it is the chair's discretion. This is a full board meeting. I don't want to limit your time. If you would like to be the spokesman for the group, please come on. Please come up. And I appreciate your comments. Give her 5 minutes. Okay. Since you're speaking on their behalf, we'll. I guess so. And if the group is not comfortable with that, then you two of you can come up. Let's just we don't need to hear. Let's try that. Let's see if you're satisfied with that. Please identify yourself and address the board.
My name is Frida Jones. I have a son at Greater Gentilly. He's been there since the beginning. We're really in a hardship right now because there's no more schools to select from for our children. The deadline is here. Our staff is going to be taken out of the school. They have to leave by June 1st, and the school session is not going to be over. We have a lot of issues that are going on at the school, and we're going down instead of up. You said if the schools make a C grade, then you take over. UNO is not making a C grade. We're going from bad to worse. Leave us alone. Give us more students. If we have to keep our school new tech, let us stay where we are. They gave us a baseline score after 1 year. UNO Charter has not had a baseline score yet. Why is that? We can't be, as you say, graded unless we have a score to be graded on. Give us a chance. That's all we're asking. Give us a chance.
And I was not clear. You're representing the school.
I'm a parent. My son goes to the school. I'm on the PTO board.
PTO board. Okay, thank you. If you're more comfortable with this, everybody can come up for 2 minutes. And if that's the way you would like to approach this, that's fine with me. Come next.
I just have a question. My paperwork says Gentilly Terrace Elementary. Is that Greater Gentilly? No. Okay, well, I'm losing. We're high school. Okay, well, I'm still. So which Greater? Well, let me go back and find something out. Are we looking at the emergency item number page 1 through 2?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Ms. Johnson, if I may clarify, there are really 2 issues involved in that particular agenda item. The first is regarding all of the UNO New Beginnings schools and their relationship with UNO. And so that's where you see Capto, Thurgood, Gentilly Terrace, which is a current New Beginnings school. And the secondary issue addressed in that agenda item is the relationship between Thurgood Marshall and Greater Gentilly High School. Greater Gentilly High School is a RSD direct run school, which is currently at a 47 AI.
Please address yourself.
Okay, good afternoon.
Please identify yourself.
Good afternoon. My name is Anisha Antoine, and I am the PTO president at Greater Gentilly High School. I'm also the parent of a junior student who's been there since Greater Gentilly began. I'm not here to fuss fight or point fingers. I'm here to support the children of Greater Gentilly and to understand why this merger is taking place. Initially, we were informed by I was informed when the principal of Thurgood Marshall came to one of our basketball games and announced that they would be taking over the school. That was the first time I heard of it. Since then, we've been hearing in the air different things, and we haven't really had anything concrete as to what's really going to happen to the school. So not only are we confused by the process, but our children are also. I'm not here to rebuttal anything. I thought UNO would present before we spoke, but anything they're presenting, I'm more than sure you all will look into to make sure it's accurate in the contract. I'm not against offering students a chance at a better education, but I don't feel that Greater Gentilly has had the opportunity to prove themselves in the short time that we've been in existence. Also, a few questions I had was, how and why was Greater Gentilly chosen as the school to merge? I know there are other schools that may need to merge because they're in a worse shape than Greater Gentilly, but how were we chose? And also, I don't feel that we were given a chance to actually meet the goals. We've only been in existence for 2 years. This is our second year. We have a problem with transportation. If they're merged, how will our students be transported back and forth? Also, with UNO Thurgood Marshall taking over, have they shown that much success where they can take over another school and make it successful? If we look at the test scores, I don't think that that is proven. I ask that you give us the opportunity to remain Greater Gentilly, to remain New Tech, to keep our school name, our school uniforms, our staff, our mascot, and everything our students have worked hard with project-based learning in New Tech to accomplish. I ask that you don't approve this merger. I ask that you don't approve this merger. And again, we haven't really had any discussions with UNO or Thurgood Marshall to come to an agreement if we're merging. It's almost like a takeover. So if you hear nothing else I say, please give us the opportunity as a New Tech school to blossom and our children can grow, because they love the school, and so do we.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hearing me. I am Lisa Martin Benson. I'm the Greater Gentilly High School PTO secretary. But more importantly, I am a mother. And that's how I sit in front of you today, as a mother. I do appreciate the work that you do. I see that this is a challenging, very challenging task that you have before you. But I'd like to agree with what Ms. Givens said in actually deferring this for now, because if we say to you right now, we don't want the merger to happen, and all these talks that have been going on since before we knew about them, that the merger will take place, we have not had opportunity. As Mr. Romer spoke about choice, we really don't have choice now. As has already been stated, that the time has passed in some schools where we could apply, and then the deadline for today, there's no way that we could get back and do those things timely. One of the things that we have had dialogue with in recent times, our voice truly has not been heard. It really hasn't. And in fact, if we can defer those things because we have not been heard, that we would greatly appreciate those things. There has not been continued dialogue with community because we are the community. We don't live there, but our children learn there. And that's what's important to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Ray? Ms. Reed? No? You defer to her? Okay. Ms. Napoleon? Okay. Is there Ms. Napoleon that wanted to speak? You defer to. Okay. You make a strong case. Okay. Mr. Andre Perry with the University of New Orleans.
Here's a new hand.
Good afternoon. I know I'm in between you and your lunch, so I'll try to be brief. This is a long, historic struggle that we've been in to really solidify both the provider and who should be a part of this school. This actually goes back years now, almost 3 years, in the formation of a steering committee that was supposed to and did hire a principal that would implement a new tech program, which happened, and there were some changes in staffing there. And I don't need to go into the long detail, but there's been a long conversation that's always been going on regarding the school. And I also just wanted to clarify that this talk is also about some just basic needs of both institutions. One, we have I would consider an improving school. The early college high school's last AI score was 68.5. And not to say this is a bad score, a good school, but the current Greater Gentilly school is 58 point something, right? Generally in the same range, same ballpark. They're both good schools. What's not talked about is there's 200 and 60 students in a building that holds 800, and you have a school with approximately 400 kids in a building that wasn't built for high school students. So I agree that we do need an opportunity to sit with parents, sit with community leaders, sit with BESE members to talk about what's best for the children. And I do think this decision will give an opportunity for us to sit down with the appropriate people. Now, with all that said, the reason why those things have not happened is generally because we're in the midst of transition. We have a new RSD superintendent coming on, and maybe he should be a part of that. It's just been a lot in flux at this time. In addition, even the university has been in flux. And so we have not done, on all of our parts, due diligence in reaching out to all the community stakeholders. But I think there is some urgency now to get these things done. And we have points at leadership at the RSD. And I do think we're going to reach out and make this happen. But again, this is not just about saying this is a good school and a bad school. There's some very pragmatic reasons why this should happen because, quite frankly, and I've been involved with ed policy for almost 20 years now, when you have a school that's only 1/4 capacity, it will close if it does not merge. And so there's a real fiscal issue here that's sort of being lost in this whole conversation. And then on the second item, and I don't want to get it confused because I also do believe it requires a nuanced conversation. There's been discussion about moving the UNO employee, the teachers who are currently UNO employees out of the university and into the nonprofit board. Again, this is a very complicated issue around what's best into providing certain services under certain conditions. And this is coming from me, I honestly do believe it requires a very nuanced conversation that can't be had in this type of format. It really needs, I believe the superintendent and others will be involved in this because we're talking about UNO and we're talking about a nonprofit. This is bigger than just a vote type situation. It requires attention to detail, in my opinion. These are two separate issues, both occurring at the same time, which makes it a little confusing. So I definitely believe that the motion to defer and to allow for the offices to make some decisions is a wise one.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Perry. Okay, we have one more comment card. Karen Harper Royal.
Thank you. I live in the neighborhood that wrote the Quick Start proposal to create Greater Gentilly. It was at my suggestion that my neighborhood association got involved with this. We did create a steering committee, and Superintendent Ballas told us that he would get us a consultant. He also added people to our steering committee. I'm just now finding out that 4 years ago, this school was promised to UNO. I think that to pretend that this is a community-driven process when you've already promised it to UNO 4 years ago is disingenuous and really took advantage of the work of our neighborhood association and the steering committee and the members from our community that we had serving on that steering committee. I think that it is a good idea to defer this because in the most recent talks about merging these schools, our steering committee has been left out of those talks. And while Dr. Perry serves on that steering committee, he did not inform us that the talks continued. And it's probably not a good idea to merge this school right now with there being so many problems. Now, I will tell you that I understand the problem that the University of New Orleans is having with their Marshall location and needing to put another one of their schools in the Marshall building. And perhaps if this item can come up again, we can talk about how do you co-locate two schools on the same campus. The Bogalusa High School and the Bogalusa New Tech School are located on the same campus. And looking at that model, we may be able to find some happy medium where we keep the new tech model, because that is one of the things that's most important to the parents and most important to the community. But if we work together, all parties involved, and not leaving any of us out of this, because I'm going to tell you, our steering committee has been left out of this.
Okay. Thank you very much.
But there's a way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Madam
Karen.
Chair,
Ms. Johnson.
I have I'm in favor of deferring. I'm not in favor of allowing the department to make the decision. I think it needs to come back to this board. But what I'm sitting here hearing is disturbing to me. And let me tell you what's disturbing. What's disturbing is that with my little bitty pea brain, I'm hearing UNO needs to have something done. And the way that UNO needs to have it done is, oops, they need to do it with this group, because that's what I'm hearing. I'm sorry. I'm hearing that UNO has a problem, and they need to get rid of their problem by doing it with some group. That's not the way you engage a community. That is just not the way. It's just not the way. Why would you have people come here who feel like they have not been a part of the process? That makes this board look bad. That's what it does. So if you have people who have not been part of the process, and we keep hearing that you're communicating so well with the people in New Orleans, then that's something that's not true. Because otherwise they wouldn't be here. When the communication is open and when people have an opportunity to participate, they don't need to show up. That's not true. So I'm going to be, in terms of deferring on this, because I am hearing there's some other issues that are not surfacing in this conversation that I'm picking up.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Any more comments on this item? Hearing none, I'm going to ask the recorder, Nina, to restate the motion, and then we're going to vote.
Okay.
Good luck.
Substitute motion by Ms. Buque, seconded by Ms. Bradford, is that the board grant the LDE authority to resolve these two issues, the first being the material amendments to the New Beginning School Foundation schools, and the second being the consolidation of Thurgood Marshall and Greater Gentilly High School, and directs the LDE to reengage the community to reach an appropriate solution and report its findings back to the board at its next meeting.
Okay, that's the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I think I can live with what I heard in the motion.
Okay, well then, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Next item.
Item 25, consideration of reports to the Louisiana Legislature, and the recommendation is to approve.
What page is that?
Page 26 of the emergency agenda.
Okay, we're on page 26 of the emergency agenda. Who's reporting on this? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, board members. Mike Coburn, Student School Learning Support. We have two reports for your consideration this afternoon. We'll be asking you. One is House Resolution 167, dealing with Board of Education collecting information relative to the use of corporal punishment in public schools. You have that report before you. Kind of some background and summary of what took place over this past year. We reviewed the Louisiana laws pertaining to corporal punishment, and we met to develop a plan of action. Following that, we began to survey districts around the state, superintendents regarding their district corporal punishment policies and the number of corporal punishment incidents that did occur in their district from 2009 to 2010. Additionally, superintendents were asked to email copies of their corporal punishment policies to us. We have received all of those. Departmental staff has been working very feverishly to put in place an electronic reporting procedure. We've been in constant communication with our IT department, and beginning Monday, which is April the 11th, will be the first reporting date of our corporal punishment from around the state. As it stands today, we do have 6 parishes or 6 districts that have already submitted their information electronically, We'll be asking them to do that consistently on month-to-month basis, beginning April and May, and then start up of next school year as well. And you'll see the corporal punishment survey in the back that we sent out. 70 districts did respond. We had 54 districts indicating that they did allow corporal punishment. 16 indicated no. Written policies of corporal punishment, 66 of those districts indicated yes. How many incidences of corporal punishment had occurred in their districts in 2009 and 2010? As you'll see there, as recorded, we had over 11,520 incidences of corporal punishment in the 09-10 school year. On that last page, you see the number of districts as they are listed, with a yes and a no, corporal punishment being allowed. List of districts there. Again, 54 districts allow it, 16 indicate no. On that last page of corporal punishment, you see the electronic submission sheet that we are asking districts to submit to us. Again, Monday, April the 11th, will be the first month that we will be collecting this data from all of our districts. Okay. Questions, comments about corporal punishment?
No. Board members, you're being asked to approve a response to a study resolution on corporal punishment. Is that the only item?
I have another one about health and physical education. Aaron Benderly is not with us today. That first one was not under my area, so okay. I've only have two. I've got the health and physical education. Do you want to hear
about the report on SCR 68? Or,
I really think this is more of a procedure. So.
It's procedure, yes, sir. It's kind of procedure going before you guys before it goes to the legislature.
Okay, yeah, this is a standard procedure that the board approves these. I do have a public comment card from Frank Endom. Is he still in the building? Yes, sir. No comments. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, board members, if you are satisfied, the chair will entertain a motion to approve.
I move that we either receive or approve, whatever you prefer.
It's approved.
Okay, approved.
Okay.
He's accepting it. Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Lee, a second by Ms. Johnson. I'm sorry, some advice coming on the side. And any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
Item 26, consideration of a change to advisory committee on educator evaluation appointments. The recommendation is to approve.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Lee to approve.
Second.
Second by Ms. Johnson. I do have one comment card. Ms. Haynes, do you wish to speak to this item?
What page again are we on?
We're on the page 174 of the emergency agenda.
Okay.
Thank you. Joyce Haynes, president of the LAE. First, I didn't have that page, so I was seeking clarity. I did find out that it was possibly the adding of names to the ACE committee for maybe folks who have left the committee. I will tell you that in the very first meeting that the chair was added to that committee, that chair wasn't even present. And then the next committee meeting, there was another person. Every meeting there seems to be a new person sitting on that committee. So I was not sure what the deal was because I did not have that sheet in the book. So my question to you is, how do you update someone who has missed several meetings already to get them acclimated to what we have been doing? I already opposed to several things that's happening on the committee. For example, we haven't had 2 years of a pilot, and we're being told that they get consensus from reading our reflections after each meeting, which I don't complete those sheets because I don't believe you get clarity there. So I'm just telling you there's a problem with adding folks to a committee, and I don't know where they're coming and who is selecting, or if you have a superintendent who's already adding folks to the committee.
Okay, Ms. Haynes, we're talking about the appointment. This item deals with the replacement of a BESE appointed appointment from District 1. Mr. Garvey, would you like to speak to that?
Yes.
Well, you don't have to. I just wanted clarity as to what was happening and what the change was, since I did not have the sheet. But if you're telling me as a BESE appointed person,
Yes.
I can take that. I'm good.
Thank you, Ms. Haynes.
Thank you.
We're glad you're here. Okay, I think we're going to go back to one other item that we deferred. Item 18, board members, page 215. Okay, this is the item that we deferred on, and Mr. Meyer, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am. We have reached language amongst those that had a question about the word before, strongly weights an applicant's ability. We've now changed that to ask an applicant to demonstrate any prior success in raising student achievement. Basically, this gives us the ability to put that in the application. You as the board determine what weight, if any, you want to put on that.
Okay, is that satisfactory to the, okay, so is there a motion to now approve item number 18? By Ms. Bafford, a second by Ms. Buquet and Mr. Bennett. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. This is the good part when the executive director says this concludes the business.
This concludes the business.
I certainly want to point out to everyone that this
Meeting
was
adjourned.
Catherine's first meeting.
Yeah. She's done very well.
Shell shock, but she'll get used to it.
So this adjourns the board meeting. Thank you for being here.
You're right.
I feel the same way. I know.
Let me tell you something. This is a special program. We usually go through that. You have two. And look, if you sit